Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of what if Deku was kidnapped at his own masquerade? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. Is it romantic how all my elegies eulogize me? I'm not cut out for all these cynical clones. These hunters with cell phones. Izuku frowned at his reflection, trying to slow the frantic thudding of his heart as it echoed too loudly in his ears, his shoulders stiff beneath ceremonial silk while the room smelled strongly of polish and incense. The distant promise of music drifted up from the ballroom below. Uraraka Ochako chuckled softly behind him, reading his nerves with the ease of someone who had known him far longer than all his other helpers. "Easy, my prince," she said gently, stepping closer to fix the fall of his robe and straighten the crown that had gone crooked during his pacing. "You're going to be amazing." She tilted her head, assessing her work. "You look stunning." Izuku blinked at the prince in the looking glass. A white toga embroidered with gold sigils of old heroes clung to his frame and brushed the marble floor, the pale fabric stark against his freckled skin and green eyes. Leather sandals peeked from beneath the hem, laced carefully up his calves. His curls had been tamed into something halfway respectable, gathered and braided at the nape of his neck with thin threads of gold. A mask of ivory and sunlight concealed the upper half of his face, leaving only his mouth visible, tense and uncertain. There was a beautiful golden crown gleaming in his green hair, gemstones spilling onto his collarbones. Uraraka nudged him with her elbow, grinning, her brown eyes bright. Her hair was tied back for once, and she wore a sundress instead of her usual attire. "You should dress like this more often. None of those plain tunics you insist on wearing." He rolled his eyes, though his mouth twitched despite himself. Uraraka wasn't like the other attendants. She talked, joked, teased him like he was still just Izuku, not the crown prince. They'd been friends for years, long before titles and ceremonies had settled so heavily on his shoulders. With a quiet thank you, Izuku stepped out into the hall. Waiting there was General Aizawa Shoyuta, standing at attention in a dark purple formal uniform, a muted purple mask obscuring his tired eyes. His boots tapped constantly against the marble floor, betraying his impatience despite his composed posture. Medals lined his chest, earned through decades of defending the kingdom of Alderfall. Upon seeing Izuku, Aizawa straightened into a salute. "At ease, General," Izuku said quickly, waving off the formality with a small smile. "It's strange seeing you without your scarf for once." Aizawa rolled his eyes and eyed his sandals. "How are you going to dance in those without falling on your face?" "I have a plan. I hope it doesn't involve hiding in the library, dear prince." Izuku winced. He had been caught hiding in the palace libraries on more than one occasion over the years, usually wedged between tall shelves with a book balanced on his knees and his crown abandoned somewhere nearby while Aizawa's voice echoed down the aisles calling his name. "And the stables are closed too, dear prince. So if you were planning anything with your chambermaid, it's best you don't follow through." Ah, there goes Izuku's plan. Despite the sarcasm, there was no real bite in it. Aizawa had been assigned as Izuku's personal shadow years ago, officially a guard, unofficially something closer to a weary mentor. He grumbled constantly, but he'd pulled Izuku out of more than one scrape, both political and literal. The ballroom stretched out like a gilded dream, its high-arched ceilings painted with frescoes of long-forgotten heroes and the gods who once walked among men, chandeliers dripping with crystal catching the candlelight and scattering it across polished marble floors so smooth that every step reflected like water. Golden pillars lined the walls, engraved with the kingdom's crest, and long velvet drapes in rich white and gold framed tall windows that looked out onto the palace gardens, where lanterns flickered in the evening breeze, and along the far side, tables groaned under platters of fruit, roasted meats, and delicate pastries, all glimmering beneath the soft glow of enchanted lamps hovering just above. The masquerade was already in full motion. At the center, upon twin thrones of carved ivory and gilded gold, sat King Yagi Tashinori and Queen Inko, regal yet relaxed amid the splendor. Izuku bowed deeply before them. Toshinori's dark eyes gleamed beneath his crown as he leaned forward slightly, his usual big, warm smile tugging at the corners of his lips, the kind that could ease even the most anxious noble. "You're late." "Only by a minute, all might," Izuku replied, rising. The crown was being uncooperative. Inko's eyes sparkled with quiet amusement. "It suits you, Izuku. You look every inch the prince tonight." "I expect you to dance a lot tonight, young man," Toshinori said, his voice both commanding and affectionate, sweeping a hand across the ballroom as if illustrating the grand night ahead. Queen Inko, elegant in her flowing white and gold robe, smiled softly beside him, her gaze steady on her son, a mix of pride and gentle amusement in her eyes as she reached for her fan and lightly fanned herself, letting the prince know he was both watched and loved. "Don't forget, you are to become the next symbol." "Yes, father." Izuku's tone was light, almost teasing. He seldom called the man his father, reserving the word for moments meant to fluster him, often coy and deliberately playful, a spark of mischief hidden beneath the formality of the court. "Show the world you are capable." "By dancing?" Izuku raised an eyebrow, a small smirk tugging at his lips. King Toshinori chuckled, shaking his head. "And by not hiding in the library with your scrolls when half the continent's heirs are circling you like hawks. Show them you can command a room without a sword in your hand, young man." "But if Lord Monoma tries to lecture me about his province's superior vineyards one more time mid-turn, I'm faking a swoon, you can't stop me." Toshinori barked a laugh despite himself, clapping a large hand on Izuku's shoulder. "Do that and I'll carry you off the floor myself. Now go before the vultures descend." He felt Aizawa's presence settle just behind his left shoulder as he descended the marble steps, a silent, immovable shadow, comforting in its own severe way. "By dancing?" Aizawa mimicked Izuku, his tone half-mocking. Izuku glared at the older man. "You tried dancing and then lecture me," he muttered, quieter this time, mostly for the satisfaction of having the last word. Aizawa's lips twitched into almost a smile, if one knew where to look. "I too was once young problem child. I have danced enough." The words were delivered so deadpan that Izuku nearly missed the dry humor buried in them. He opened his mouth to retort when a bright, booming laugh cut across the ballroom's murmur and orchestra. Well, if it isn't my dear prince and respected general." Izuku glanced up to see Yamada Hizashi leaning casually against the banister, a grin tugging at his lips. His usual easy warmth contrasted sharply with Aizawa's rigid presence. Hizashi Yamada, better known as Present Mic to anyone who'd ever heard him announce a tournament, strode up in a flare of golden fabric and louder-than-necessary jewelry. His long blonde hair was pulled into an elegant tail tonight, but nothing could tame the sheer volume of the man himself. Izuku's face lit up. "Are stables open?" "You have to dance, prince," Aizawa admonished, turning to press a quick kiss on Hizashi's cheek. "I was just telling him how much we had to dance." Hizashi threw his head back and laughed again, drawing curious glances from a cluster of nearby nobles. "Oh, he has. Trust me, kid, he has." He slung an arm around Aizawa's shoulders. "Back in the day, your grumpy general could cut a rug like nobody's business. Waltz, gavotte, even that ridiculous volta the Southern Kingdoms love, he nailed every lift." Aizawa's eyes narrowed to slits. "Yamada." "What? It's ancient history." Hizashi grinned, his voice dropped to a theatrical whisper. "And don't tell me you didn't enjoy a slow dance together." Izuku rolls his eyes. "You know everybody in the palace knows, right? There's not need for you to keep it a secret." "None of your business, dear prince," Aizawa drawled. Izuku's grin widened, stepping a little closer. "I am the prince," he shot back, mock indignation in his voice. "This is my kingdom, general. Every fountain, every street, every single one of my subjects is my business." "Hear, hear." Aizawa just groaned. The first hour passed in a whirl of polite smiles, careful footsteps, and endless introductions. Izuku danced with Lady Yayarosa's cousin, with the daughter of a northern duke, with a shy girl. He laughed at their jokes, complimented their gowns, and tried not to count the minutes until he could escape to the buffet table. Eventually, his feet aching in the unfamiliar sandals, he excused himself and slipped toward the edge of the floor. Izawa followed at a discreet distance, scanning the crowd with half-lidded eyes that missed nothing. Izuku accepted a goblet of chilled water from a passing servant, spotting Achiko's familiar round face and warm smile as she balanced a tray nearby. She winked at him behind her simple servant's mask, and he felt some of the tension ease from his shoulders. "You vanished," a voice said to his left. "I was starting to think you'd escaped." Beside Izuku was standing Yashiro Shuto, a tall, striking man of the same age as him, with dark black hair and a strange red mark encircling his left eye. Izuku was wonderful friends with him now. To everyone else, he was the prince's enigmatic companion, a young noble of minor but ancient lineage, granted apartments in the palace for services to the crown that no one could quite specify. He dressed impeccably in muted silks of white and crimson and spoke rarely. Their friendship hadn't started easily. When Izuku was 10, he had found the boy sitting alone by the river, tears staining his cheeks. Determined to befriend him, Izuku had given him a home. He wished Yashiro had asked for a dance instead. "Hardly." Izuku leaned slightly closer, lowering his voice just enough for Yashiro to hear. "I would have," he admitted, glancing over his shoulder at the glittering ballroom and the throngs of nobles watching every step, "but I'm being watched." Yashiro allowed himself the smallest huff of amusement. "You once outran half the palace guard through the catacombs when we were 13. "That was different," Izuku protested under his breath, cheeks warming. "I had you creating ice diversions. And we were stealing strawberry tarts, not abandoning a national ball." They fell silent. "You're brooding again," Izuku murmured, nudging him with an elbow. "People will think I bore you." Yashiro's gaze flicked down to him, the corner of his mouth lifting in the tiniest fraction of a smile, the one he saved only for Izuku. "You do bore me. Constantly." "Liar." Izuku grinned, undeterred. "You're just mad that Lady Yaoyorozu asked me to dance before she asked you." "She asked you because you're the prince," Yashiro said flatly. "She asked me last week and I declined." "See? Brooding." Yashiro looked around thoughtfully. "The general's gone off with Mike again. You could leave, you know." "For the stables?" "For the stables." Shuto smiled. When they were younger, 12, 13, 14, Izuku would sneak out of lessons or banquets with some flimsy excuse, and Shuto would already be waiting by the paddock, 2 horses saddled and ready. No grooms, no guards and chastise them. Just the 2 boys racing across the moonlit fields, hooves thundering like heartbeats, wind tearing at their clothes and hair. Riding with Yashiro had always been one of his favorite escapes. Izuku huffed. "I considered it. You've been here 2 hours almost. That's 2 hours more than last year. I'm almost impressed." "Almost." Izuku narrowed his eyes, leaning against the opposite wall to catch his breath. "I danced with 17 noble daughters." 17. How many have you danced with? "I hardly think this is a competition." "I mean you are the crown P." Screams erupted as chandeliers exploded in showers of crystal. The orchestra's music fractured into discord. All the partners broke apart, covering their ears, shouting from the sudden pain. Izuku's hands ignited instinctively, green energy crackling to life around his fists, one of the few remnants of the ancient quirk passed down to him by the king. A deafening boom shook the entire ballroom, the first explosion detonating near the grand entrance. Flames flashed orange and white, but it was the thick plume of acrid smoke and choking dust that followed that truly turned the glittering hall into a nightmare. A figure made its way towards Izuku. Aizawa's voice cut through the panic, calm and sharp. "Prince, to me now." But before Izuku could move, a gloved hand clamped over his mouth from behind and a sickly sweet scent of nitroglycerin flooded his senses and the green light in his palms guttered out. A cloth pressed to his face. His light sputtered out as the world tipped and fell away and the crown prince of Alderfall disappeared into the dark. And the last thing he heard before the explosions claimed him was Aizawa's furious roar echoing into the void. "Take me to the lakes where all the poets went to die. I don't belong. My only one. My smoking gun. My eclipsed sun." This has broken me down. Where the F is your crazy beach? The voice was deep, roughened by command rather than volume. It was the kind of voice that didn't need to be raised to be obeyed. A chill crawled down Izuku's spine despite the heat pressing in on him from all sides. Midoriya Izuku didn't know how long he'd been unconscious. Minutes, hours, maybe longer. Awareness returned slowly, dragged up by the sound of voices cutting through the dark. Relax. This second voice was sharper, hoarse, almost mocking. She'll be here. Had to shake off the guards first. A short, humorless laugh. Aldra's soldiers are pathetic. Took the prince and the general without breaking a sweat. Izuku stayed still, breathing slow, and took in his surroundings with his eyes closed. Sand pressed against his back, clung to his clothes, worked its way into his mouth and hair. His crown and mask were gone. His wrists and ankles were bound in heavy chains etched with dull, unfamiliar runes. He tried to activate one for all, and the response was nothing but hollow silence. Quirk suppressors. A sharp inhale sounded beside him, followed by the scrape of movement. Well, look at that, the hoarse voice said, amused. Morning, General Aizawa. General Aizawa? Izuku forced his eyes open. Above him stretched a vast, starless sky, black and empty. He pushed himself upright, joints stiff, vision swimming for a moment. A campfire burned a short distance away. Its light revealed Aizawa Shoyuda sitting to Izuku's left, similarly shackled, eyes narrowed in alert fury. Across from them stood two men dressed head to toe in black, tunics, cloaks, boots blending into the night like shadows given form. They looked distinctly different. One was lean and pale, with wild ash-blonde hair and crimson eyes glinting with a crazed look. The other's face was extremely scarred. The flames lit him unevenly, casting harsh shadows that made the damage impossible to ignore. Scar tissue crawled across his jaw and cheek, pale and tight, twisting the skin as if it had been burned and then burned again before it was allowed to heal. One side of his mouth didn't quite move right when he spoke. Izuku felt his chest tighten. He nudged the blond man as his caught Izuku's. They're awake. Yeah, I noticed. He rose and approached Izuku, never breaking eye contact. Crouching in front of him, he reached out and seized Izuku's face, turning it slightly from side to side. The leather of his gloves was rough, impersonal. Izuku knew he shouldn't resist. Resistance without power would be pointless, but his jaw tightened as he tried to remain stiff. Any injuries? The man asked. From the fire, the scarred man scoffed. What are you doing? Prince's face to remain untouched. The blonde glared. Besides, they need to be able to FING walk, don't they? They can't be too injured. The dark-haired man pursed his lips. Are you hurt, idiot? The man in front of his asked again. Izuku swallowed. His throat burned when he spoke. Who are you? The man exhaled through his nose. Not your concern. Who are you? Izuku repeated, sharper this time, lifting his chin despite the chains biting into his skin. Firelight reflected in his eyes, bright and unyielding. For a moment, the man simply studied him. Then, deliberately, Baku. I am Bakugu. He flicked his fingers toward the scarred man. And he is Dabi. Brat. I'm Todoroki Tuya, pleased to meet you, dear prince. Izuku's gaze hardened. You work for Endeavor. Shut it, Bakugu snapped, his palms sparking faintly in warning. You talk too much. You may be prince, but you do not get special treatment here. General Aizawa and I are high-value captives. Izuku cut in, standing his ground even as Bakugu loomed closer. By law, we're entitled to be treated with respect. Something dangerous flashed behind Bakugu's eyes, sharp as a blade. For a heartbeat, Izuku thought he might strike him. Instead, Bakugu straightened and turned away. Himiko Toga should be here by dawn. We move then. When he woke, sunlight filtered through the canvas flaps, painting stripes across the wagon's interior. He was still bound, wrists and ankles chained, propped against sacks of supplies. Across from him sat Bakugu, arms crossed, staring out the back opening with bloodshot eyes. Izuku had drifted off without meaning to, the rocking motion of the caravan pulling him under in a way that felt almost insulting given the circumstances. "Where are we going?" Izuku asked, his voice hoarse from disuse. Bakugu sighed heavily, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Northward." "The Endeavor Kingdom?" Izuku pressed, heart sinking. "Yeah," Bakugu grunted, not meeting his eyes. Izuku hesitated, then blurted, "Why are you doing this?" Bakugu's jaw tightened, his eyes still closed. "Shut up." Izuku noticed the dark circles under Bakugu's eyes, the slight slump in his shoulders. He must have been on watch all night, Izuku thought. No wonder he's exhausted. Deciding not to push further, Izuku shifted and turned his attention instead to the sliver of daylight filtering in through the open flap, watching hills roll by in muted browns and dull greens, memorizing the shape of the land out of habit more than hope, noting absently that no beautiful D had been placed over his eyes and choosing not to comment on it. The caravan was swaying in a way that told him they were being pulled by a single horse, with another set of hoofbeats farther ahead that suggested Aizawa was being transported separately. Time passed in silence. Izuku glanced back at Bakugu, only to find the man's head lolled against the wagon wall, eyes closed, breathing steady. In repose, the perpetual scowl softened. His ash-blonde hair fell messily over his forehead, sharp features relaxed into something almost serene. He looks peaceful, Izuku thought, then stupidly beautiful. Heat rushed to his cheeks. He shook his head vigorously, as much as the chains allowed. He began spiraling briefly into a silent lecture to himself about Stockholm Syndrome before cutting it off and focusing again on the fact that they were not moving anymore. Minutes ticked by. Then an hour. The sun dipped lower, shadows lengthening. No voices from ahead, no movement. Izuku's unease grew. Pitch darkness would fall soon, and out here. Who knew what lurked? After what felt like far too long, Izuku frowned. "Bakugu," he said, then louder, "Bakugu." Nothing. The light outside had dimmed to near black, the night pressing in thick and close, and Izuku had no intention of sitting quietly until something with teeth decided to investigate, so he leaned forward as much as the chains allowed and shook Bakugu's arm. Bakugu jolted awake violently. He snapped. "What happened?" Izuku swallowed. "We've been stopped for 183 minutes. Bakugu stared at him. "What?" Izuku scrambled, heat flooding his face. "I guessed." Izuku said carefully, not wanting to admit he'd been precisely counting minutes the whole trip. Bakugu swore under his breath, shoved the caravan door open, and jumped out, only to climb back in seconds later, panic sharp in his movements. "Sheet. Sheet, sheet, sheet." "What?" Izuku asked, heart starting to race. "What happened?" "Shut the f up," Bakugu hissed. The horse chewed through the tether and bolted. Chills went down Izuku's spine. "And," Bakugu continued, already reaching for the door again, "this area is crawling with werewolves." Izuku's blood went cold. "You are not going to leave me here, are you?" Izuku's panic grew, his mind immediately supplying vivid, unhelpful images of teeth and claws and moonlight and himself waking up hairy and feral, and what will my mother say? "No. The job is to capture you alive." Izuku finds himself feeling grateful. He does not want to go out like that. "Come on," Bakugu snapped. "We have to get out of here." Izuku stared pointedly at his bound legs. "You kind of have to untie me first." Bakugu swore colorfully, glanced at the tree-line where a distant howl echoed, and made a split-second decision. Instead of fumbling with knives, he scooped Izuku up in one fluid motion, bridal style, shackles and all. Izuku found himself admiring the strength. "Where are we going?" "Shut the F up, idiot." Bakugu hissed, turning left sharply as the unmistakable sound of inhuman footsteps echoed. They ran for what felt like hours. Bakuga's explosions lit their path in controlled bursts, propelling them over roots and ravines, scorching the ground behind to mask their trail. He moved like he knew the forest, boots pounding earth, branches snapping back against his shoulders, breath controlled but growing harsher by the minute. Izuku clutched at his tunic with bound hands, pressed close enough to feel the heat radiating off Bakuga's body, the tension in every muscle as the howls drew nearer and then farther and then nearer again, echoing until Izuku lost all sense of direction or time. Minutes blurred into something longer and uglier. Bakugo's breathing turned ragged. His steps stayed sure, but Izuku felt the tremors start in his arms, the subtle hitch each time Bakugo adjusted his grip. Even with his quirk, the weight of carrying Izuku nonstop was taking its toll. His breathing grew ragged, sweat beading on his forehead, steps losing their precision. "Bakugo," Izuku said, louder now, an idea cutting through the panic. "Put me down. I can run." "No. I mean it," Izuku insisted. "You're exhausted." "No. I won't run away," Izuku blurted, words tumbling over each other. "I don't know this forest. If I tried, I'd be dead in minutes and you know it." Bakugo didn't answer at first. He ran on for several more strides, jaw clenched, breath coming sharp and uneven. Finally he clicked his tongue and skidded to a stop, setting Izuku down roughly on his feet. "If you bolt," Bakugo said lowly, eyes burning into him, "I will break your legs." He put Izuku down and untied him. Izuku bolted. He had a great sense of direction and had a vague idea where the clearing was. He heard Bakugo curse silently far away now. Suddenly, something yanked him sideways, a brutal force slamming into his ribs and driving the air from his lungs as he hit the ground hard, dirt and leaves filling his mouth. He barely had time to register Bakugo's shout before pain bloomed sharp and blinding, his suppressed power useless, his shackles clanking uselessly as strong hands pinned him down. "Idiot," Bakugo snarled, wrestling him still. "I never took the suppressors off." The world tilted, blurred, then faded. Izuku woke to silence. He blinked groggily, taking in unfamiliar surroundings, a dimly lit room with wooden beams overhead, a crackling fireplace casting warm glows across worn furniture. He was on a creaky bed, wrists still shackled but ankles free now, chained loosely to the bed frame. The air smelled of herbs and smoke, like an old cabin deep in the woods. This was the house? A weird, isolated one, with shelves lined in strange jars and stranger books. Izuku sat up slowly, chains rattling. "Where are we?" Bakugo's eyes narrowed. "Safe. For now." Izuku swallowed, the betrayal still stinging in the air between them. But beneath Bakugo's glare, there was something else. Fear? Whatever it was, Izuku's escape attempt had failed spectacularly. And now, trapped in this weird house with his captor, he wondered just how much deeper this mess was going to get. Hunger crept up on Izuku slowly and then all at once, a dull ache turning sharp enough that it made his head throb, and when his stomach finally growled loud enough to be humiliating, Bakugo reappeared and wordlessly set a bowl down in front of him, a crude mix of thick grayish sludge studded with chunks of mashed wild fruit, the smell unfamiliar and not particularly inviting, prompting Izuku to squint at it suspiciously and lean forward, trying to inhale as subtly as possible. He shoved the bowl toward Izuku, who was still chained to the bed frame with enough slack to sit up. "Eat." Izuku eyed the unappetizing mess warily. Bakugo stared at him. "Idiot. What are you doing?" "Checking for poison," Izuku said without looking up. Bakugo barked out a short, incredulous laugh. "Do you even know what poisonous fruits look like?" Izuku's freckled face went sheepish, his gaze dropping to the floorboards. Bakugo clicked his tongue, irritated, but instead of snapping again he pointed at the bowl with the knife tip. "Those purple ones? Blackthorn berries safe if they're ripe, bitter as hell otherwise. The red are hawthorn, good for the heart, but don't eat the seeds. Yellow ones are wild crabapples, tart but fine." Izuku picked up a blackberry and looked questioningly at Bakugo. "Those have a little star shape on the bottom, or white ones with red stems, and," he took something out of his bag, "leaves matter too. If it's got smooth edges and smells like almonds when crushed, stay the F away." Izuku blinked, surprised, wondering if this was some elaborate misdirection, then frowning as something tugged at his memory, the words slotting neatly into place alongside half-forgotten lessons from endless tutoring sessions. "And if birds won't touch it, neither should you." Up close like this, with the firelight softening the harsh lines of Bakugo's face, Izuku realized something else. The guy looked His age, even perhaps a year older. How old are you? Izuku asked. Bakugo grunted. Old enough. Izuku pressed his luck. You don't look much older than me. Just eat. Izuku stubbornly refuses to pick up the bowl. Another grunt, but then Bakugo fixed him with a flat stare. Don't you think if I wanted to kill you, I'd have done it while you were out cold? Or left you for the wolves? Izuku rubbed at his eyes with his free hand, frustration boiling over into sudden rage. He snarled, yanking at the chains hard enough to rattle the bed frame. No. You'd probably rather make people suffer first, drag it out, and toy with them. That's what Endeavor's dogs do, right? Bakugo's expression didn't change, but he let out a long, weary sigh. Starving yourself won't do shit except make you weaker. Why are you doing this? Izuku asks again. Let me ask you a question. Bakugo sat up. Why didn't you just jump out when I was asleep? Izuku hesitated. Then, quietly, I didn't want to leave Aizawa by himself. Bakugo studied him for a moment, expression unreadable. HM. And then what? Your cowardice caught up with you and you decided to run anyway? The jab stung. Bakugo's eyes narrowed. Well, he pressed. I'm waiting. Izuku's gaze dropped to the floor as his mind replayed the memory of running through the forest in fragments of sound and fear and cold logic. The moment his feet had hit the ground, he had realized many things. First, Aizawa was capable. More than capable. Endeavor didn't want him dead. They wanted information, leverage, something to twist, and that meant Aizawa would be kept alive, tortured probably, but not executed. Second, All Might's voice, grave and urgent, from one of their secret meetings years ago. Young Midoriya, if you ever hear anything at all about Todoroki Tuya, you tell me immediately. It's more important than you know. Seeing Dabi's scarred face up close by the campfire had slammed the connection home. Third, while memorizing the landscape from the wagon, Izuku had recognized the rolling hills, the specific bend of the river they'd crossed at dawn. He'd studied maps of the border regions obsessively. He knew exactly which passes led straight into the Endeavor Kingdom now. If he escaped once, he could lead a rescue team back, straight to them. And fourth, even if he couldn't escape as he'd sprinted into the trees, panic overriding sense, he'd bitten the inside of his cheek hard enough to draw blood, then deliberately let it drip onto leaves and grass as he ran. A trail. A desperate, breadcrumb trail for someone to pick up. But he wasn't about to tell Bakugo any of that. Bakugo stood abruptly, snatching the untouched bowl from Izuku's lap and dumping it onto a side table with a disgusted scowl. Suit yourself. Starve if you want. See if I care. But as he turned toward the fire to stoke it higher against the growing chill outside, Izuku caught the faintest flicker in those crimson eyes, frustration, maybe even reluctant curiosity. Gleefully, he thought of how Bakugo hadn't broken his legs after all. When Izuku stirred again, his head pounded with the familiar ache of being knocked out one too many times lately. The rocking motion told him he was in another caravan, but this one felt different. The wheels rumbled over smooth cobblestone instead of dirt roads, and the air carried the sharp tang of. He opened his eyes. Towering buildings loomed outside, sleek spires of black glass and red steel, banners bearing the flaming crest of the Endeavor Kingdom fluttering in the wind. Citizens hurried along crowded streets in dark uniforms, faces hard and wary. His heart sank like a stone. They were deep inside the kingdom. For a fleeting moment he considered screaming, making a scene, shouting his name and title until his throat tore itself raw, but the faces outside the caravan were hard and indifferent and dressed in the colors of this land, and he knew better than to expect allies here, so he swallowed the urge and stayed silent as they rolled forward and the gates of the palace loomed and opened without hesitation, guards stepping aside the instant Bakugo appeared, their heads dipping just enough to make Izuku's stomach twist with a new, uncomfortable question about exactly who his captor was. Bakugo didn't slow. He hauled Izuku out, chains clinking, and marched him through polished halls and up winding stairs and through echoing halls lit by roaring braziers, till they were ushered into a cavernous throne room where Enji sat waiting, flame-bright hair pulled back, eyes sharp and burning with something close to delight. My favorite package was delayed, Enji boomed, his laugh echoing like thunder, cold and mocking. Bakugo stared back coolly, unfazed, dragging Izuku forward. Hardly. You gave us 2 days. Izuku's eyes widened at the rash, almost challenging tone. But Enji merely huffed, flames flaring briefly before he looked away, waving a dismissive hand, the moment passing with attention Izuku felt but didn't yet understand, because whatever Bakugo was, he was clearly not someone Enji could afford to provoke. Take him to the dungeons, Enji said finally, waving a hand as if bored already. Guards seized Izuku, shoving him down dim stone corridors lit by sputtering torches. The air grew damp and cold as they descended, the clank of his chains echoing off the walls. Finally, a heavy iron door swung open, and he was moved into a cramped cell with straw-strewn floors and rusted bars. In the corner sat Aizawa, wrists bound, a heavy blindif LD wrapped tight around his eyes to sever his connection to his power. General, Izuku whispered hoarsely, dropping to his knees beside him. It is I, Prince Izuku. Are you all right? Aizawa tilted his head toward the sound of his voice and nodded once. All good, he murmured. What happened to you guys? Got derailed, Izuku said quietly. His voice dropped. I tried to escape. Thought I could get help, lead someone back. But it was no good. So, I think there's a little hope. I left a trail. And I confirmed something important about Dabi. Aizawa nodded slowly, processing. Smart. Hold on to that. The cell door creaked open again, interrupting him. A figure skipped in, blonde buns, uniform splattered with dark stains, eyes wide and manic, fangs peeking from her grin. You must be Izuku, she squealed, clapping her hands as she bounced closer. You're so cute. The pictures didn't do you justice at all, my poor prince is all locked up. She leaned in way too close to the bars, cheeks flushed with excitement. If you swear to marry me, I'll free you, you know? We could be so happy, blood and all. Izuku recoiled, stomach twisting in horror as the metallic scent hit him fully. Her uniform wasn't just stained. She held a small vial in one hand, crimson liquid sloshing inside. Blood. Before he could respond, heavy boots stormed in. Bakugo shoved past the guards, face twisted in fury. Tia, get your pet out of here, he roared, voice echoing off the stone. A wave of nausea and terror crashed over Izuku. This wasn't just captivity. This was a den of monsters. In his years of working under King Enji as assassin, Bakugo Katsuki had met all kinds of people. Pretentious lords and simpering ladies, fragile princesses and entitled princes, ambitious generals and cowardly ministers. Courtiers, advisors, merchants with too much gold and too many enemies, all of them convinced in one way or another that crown made them untouchable, that their title or their wealth made them untouchable. But in his time with royalty, he had never met anyone like Prince Midoriya Izuku. He had expected the Aldra prince to be a brat, to be spoiled and loud, as fragile as porcelain. Instead, he had found himself face to face with a man of strange, unyielding strength. His eyes, though the color of forests, blazed with fire. This prince wasn't porcelain. He was steel, tempered and waiting. Bakugo didn't know what to make of the prince, but he found himself wondering about the outcome of all this. He finds himself not believing that the prince had tried to run away because he was a coward, and he feared, suddenly, exactly why he had. He should have told the king this. Why hadn't he told the king this? He shakes his head and turns away, leaving the prince and his general alone. My twisted knife. My sleepless night. My winless fight. This has frozen my ground. Chapter text. I do remember the swing of your step. The life of the party, you're showing off again. The council chamber of Aldra was tense, the golden light of the late afternoon filtering through tall windows, dust motes drifting in the silence. The usual bustle of servants and aides had been replaced by an uneasy stillness. Queen Inko sat at one end, her hands twisted together so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Tears tracked silently down her cheeks, but she made no sound, only stared at the empty chair where Izuku should have been. King All Might stood behind her, one massive hand resting gently on her shoulder. His usual booming voice was gone. replaced by something low and careful, meant only for her. "He's strong, Inko," he murmured, bending slightly so his words brushed her ear. "Stronger than any of us knew. He's alive. I feel it in my bones." She leaned into his touch just a fraction, but her eyes stayed fixed on that empty seat. Across the table, Present Mike paced like a caged lion, his bright hair disheveled from running his hands through it too many times. He stopped abruptly, slapping both palms on the map spread before them. "We're not giving up hope, people. Not a chance." His voice cracked despite the force behind it. "Are we certain it is Endeavor?" Ida Tenya asks, adjusting his reading glasses. "It has to be. The signs were all there. 2 teams. Nizu clears his throat. Tsuyu Azui and Uraraka Achiko will ride straight through the main gates of the Endeavor Kingdom at first light. We'll request an audience with the king himself and ask him directly." "And the rest of us," Ciro said from the shadows near the door, voice flat and tired, "will not be diplomatic. We'll search above and underground, take the old routes, tunnels under the walls, the abandoned merchant passes, the smugglers' ladders above the eastern cliffs. Every hidden way we know Endeavor's people still use. We search for tracks, we'll take the dogs too for scent, for any sign he was dragged through there." Chio Shizenji tapped her cane against the stone floor. "I'll go with the search teams. If there's even a scrap of cloth or a drop of blood, I'll know it's his." Queen Inko pressed a hand to her chest, visibly distraught. Tashinori leaned close, resting a hand on her shoulder. "You've raised him to be brave," he said gently, "and he will not be alone. Aldera stands with him." Presently, Kirishima stepped forward, his usual cool composure softened by the urgency in his tone. "Your Majesty, Your Highness," he said firmly, "we must maintain hope. Every hour wasted in despair is an hour lost in the search. We will find him. I insist on it." The queen's shoulders trembled, but she let out a small, shuddering breath, nodding as she drew in Tashinori's strength. Uraraka stepped closer. "Then it's decided. Tsuyu and I go to the Endeavor Kingdom immediately. The rest will scour the grounds and passages here. We'll move carefully but swiftly. We'll bring him back." Midnight leaned forward, red nails drumming on the table. "And if Endeavor denies everything while his guards smirk? What then?" Uraraka met her eyes steadily. "Then we'll already have what we need from the ground. Proof. Or a trail." Tashinori finally rose, his presence filling the chamber with quiet authority. "Go. Bring our prince and general home. Aldra's heart beats with them, and we will not rest until they are safe." Uraraka bowed sharply. "Yes, Your Majesty." As they left the chamber, Inko lingered a moment longer, gazing at the empty space where her son's laughter should have been, Tashinori's steady hand warm on hers. The ride to the Endeavor Kingdom took 2 hard days across frozen roads, Uraraka and Tsuyu pushing their horses through wind that bit like knives. They arrived at dusk, cloaks dusted white with snow, the great red stone gates of the capital looming against a bruised sky. Soldiers in polished armor stepped forward at their approach, bowing slightly when Uraraka called out their purpose. "We request an audience with King Enji Todoroki," she said, voice steady, heart hammering beneath her chest plate. "It is a matter of urgency regarding Prince Izuku of Aldera." The guards recognized Aldra's colors immediately. Spears lowered, but not in threat, only caution. Within the hour, they were escorted to the throne hall. The throne room was opulent, but cold, firelight glinting off metal and marble, the atmosphere tense. At the center sat King Enji, tall and imposing, his arms crossed over a tunic of deep crimson. His glare alone was enough to quiet the chamber. "I am Uraraka Achiko, and this is my companion Tsuyu Azui. We come on behalf of Aldra," Uraraka began, bowing formally. "Prince Izuku and General Aizawa have been taken. We ask for any information regarding this and we are ready for negotiations." There was a tense silence in the room. "You believe we have your prince and general?" "Your Majesty, we are left to believe." Enji's expression hardened, his hands resting deliberately on the arms of his throne. "I know nothing of any Aldra prince or your general," he said, voice even but cold. How dare you accuse us of being in possession of your people without any? Your Majesty, please. Allow me. You are dismissed, Uraraka Achiko. With a curt nod, Uraraka and Tsuyu were escorted back to their horses. They rode in silence, the tension of rejection heavy in the cool night air. The stars above offered no comfort. And then, Uraraka's instincts prickled again, an unease she could not ignore. She tugged gently on Tsuyu's reins. Wait, she whispered, voice low. Something isn't right. We stay here. Tsuyu's tongue flicked nervously. Ochako. Just one night. We camp in the pines beyond the outer wall. If nothing happens, we ride home at dawn. They found a hollow among the trees, tethered the horses, built no fire. Hours passed in silence, breath fogging the air. Close to midnight, Uraraka stood. I'm going in. Tsuyu's eyes widened. Alone? I'm lighter alone. You stay with the horses. If I'm not back by the third hour, ride for Aldra and tell them everything. Tsuyu gripped her sleeve, fingers trembling. Be careful, Karo. Please. Uraraka touched her cheek gently, then slipped into the dark. She knew the servant's postern from old maps, half-forgotten, rarely guarded in winter. A touch of her power lifted her over the wall as silently as falling snow. Inside the palace grounds, she kept to shadows, boots making no sound on the fresh powder. Voices drew her toward a lit window on the third floor, high but not unreachable. She floated herself up, pressed against the stone beside it, and listened. King Enji's voice, low and furious. The prince will break. If not today, then tomorrow. If not tomorrow, then the day after. I will break him, and he will tell me all about Aldera. If the prince is to be moved again, it must be done before dawn, another voice added. Uraraka's heart clenched. Her instincts had been right. Something was happening here, and she could hear the plot unfolding right under the king's own roof. She lingered only long enough to memorize every word, then drifted down into the darkness like a ghost. By the time she reached the trees, Tsuyu was pacing, eyes wide with fear. He's here, Uraraka whispered, swinging into the saddle. In the dungeons. And we know exactly who's keeping him. Tsuyu exhaled a shaky ribbon of frost. What do? We can't ride straight home yet, she said, voice low but firm. If we leave now and Enji moves Izuku tomorrow, we lose him. We'd be 2 days behind before anyone could get back here. Then, send a message back home and lie low here. Close enough to watch the gates. If they move him, we'll know. We'll follow. Tsuyu's tongue flicked out nervously, tasting the cold. Lie low here? Achiko, that is not a good idea. The patrols will sweep these woods by morning. We'll be caught or frozen. Uraraka reached across the small space between their horses and caught Tsuyu's gloved hand. We won't stay in the open. There's an old charcoal burner's hut I remember from the maps, half a league east, tucked in a ravine near the river. Roof still good, walls thick. Hunters use it sometimes, but not in winter. We'll be invisible there. Achiko. We'll be safe as long as we stay out of sight. I've got a plan. Tsuyu searched her face for a long moment, then let out a slow breath that curled like smoke. Okay, Carol. But the moment it feels wrong, we ride. Deal. Reluctantly, Tsuyu nodded, trusting her friend's instincts even as her nerves coiled tight. The two rode silently. Uraraka pulled a small bamboo tube from her saddlebag and unrolled the thin strip of rice paper inside. Tsuyu watched as she wrote in quick, neat strokes. Prince confirmed alive in Endeavor Dungeons. Let us know what to do. Both still here as of tonight. We remain to watch. She signed it with the Queen's personal seal, melted a drop of wax, and pressed the ring into it. One of their 2 messenger pigeons cooed softly from its wicker cage. Uraraka fastened the tube to its leg, whispered, "Home," quickly, and carried it outside. With a soft rustle of wings, the bird lifted into the night sky, circling once before arrowing west toward Aldera. Uraraka nodded to herself, pulling the door shut behind them. We take turns watching the road, Uraraka said, settling onto the bench with her cloak pulled tight. 4 hours each. Tomorrow we get closer, find a better vantage. Tsuyu crouched beside the tiny flame, warming her hands. You really think we can do this? 2 of us against a whole kingdom. Uraraka's eyes reflected the firelight, steady and bright. We're not fighting a kingdom yet. We're just watching. And if they try to move them, she rested a hand on the hilt of her dagger. Then we fight smart. We get them both out. Or we die trying. Tsuyu gave a small, croaking laugh despite herself. You sound like Izuku now, Karo. Good, Uraraka whispered. Then maybe some of his stubbornness rubbed off. And I'd roll my eyes and then you'd pull me in. I'm not much for dancing, but for you, I did chapter text. If you would have blinked, then I would have. Looked away at the first glance. If you tasted poison, you could have. Spit me out at the first chance. Izuku woke to voices drifting through the stone corridor. He looked around to find that the general was not there anymore. He was probably moved. What happened? Tuya asked mildly, his tone almost bored. Mad Horse got spooked. Bolted. Bakuga's voice sounded oddly tight. Goodness, Tuya drawled, leaning against the cave wall. Whatever did you do then? Ran, Bakuga said flatly. In the woods. Tuya's eyebrow arched. Bakuga didn't answer at once. When he did, it was curt. We weren't in the woods. We were close to the gates. And the prince couldn't run. I thought he wasn't injured. Bakuga shrugged. Looked like he was. Probably pretended to be tougher than he is. Tuya laughed softly, the sound fading as his footsteps retreated down the corridor. How very like him. He pushed off the wall and melted back into the darkness without another word. Bakuga turned sharply. Izuku was already staring at him. Where is Aizawa? In another cell. He's safe. Izuku nodded. Why did you lie? Izuku asked this time. Bakuga's eyes narrowed. About the house in the woods, he clarified. None of your business. Bakuga snapped. Izuku didn't look away. Who is that guy? He told you. Todoroki Tuya. Yeah, but what does he do? Izuku asked, thinking he might as well get some intel if he was going to be here. Bakuga went back to sharpening the dagger. King's right-hand man. Izuku wondered if that was all. The thought lingered and it made him uncomfortable. Then his gaze dropped to Bakuga's outfit. Izuku studied him. Fresh mud streaked Bakuga's boots, half-frozen clumps of snow still clinging to the soles. You were out again? Izuku asked. Bakuga's hand stilled. None of your business. Why were you out? A long sigh hissed through Bakuga's teeth. For the DMN horse. Izuku blinked, then couldn't help the soft snort that escaped. You went looking for the horse? Shut the F up, Bakuga snarled, voice low and dangerous. She'll die in the cold. Izuku stared at him, something shifting behind his eyes. Wow. You treat horses better than you treat humans. Bakuga shrugged, resuming his sharpening. Horses treat humans better than humans treat humans. Izuku hummed quietly, the sound thoughtful rather than mocking. Why are you doing this? He asked after a moment. What's in it for you? Bakuga's glare snapped back to him, sharp as the blade in his hand. Just shut up. I want to know. What are you guys doing? Bakuga sighed again. You'd better start giving them information. Or what? They'll torture me? Izuku's voice was defiant. Yes. I don't care. Bakuga stared at him, incredulous. What's in it for you? He shot back. Defending Aldera? I'm their prince, Izuku snapped. Right? Bakuga said flatly. Izuku's jaw tightened. Why do you hate us? Bakuga shrugged. Why? That was when Tuya returned, his footsteps light and unhurried. Well, Tuya drawled pleasantly, eyes flicking between them, is the brat prince giving you trouble? Bakuga only shrugged again. Tuya turned his attention to Izuku, voice lowering. There has been several disappearances. All roads lead back to Aldera. His smile thinned. You tell us why. Izuku's stomach dropped. I don't know anything about that. Tuya leaned closer, eyes sharp. Interesting. He murmured something under his breath to Bakuga, too low for Izuku to catch, then straightened and walked away once more, vanishing into the shadows. Izuku swallowed. I don't know about any disappearances, he said quickly. I swear. I really don't. Bakugo studied him for a long moment. Listen, he said finally. I don't know about them either. But I do know about a boy who vanished from your kingdom. His voice hardened. Where was your king then? Where were the troops? Why wasn't anyone looking for him? Izuku shook his head frantically. I don't know. I don't know. At least know what you're defending, Bakugo muttered. Izuku let out a sharp, bitter laugh. That's rich coming from you. You work for Endeavor. Everyone knows what he does. Bakugo's eyes flicked up, red and unreadable in the firelight. I don't work for anyone, he said quietly. I'm here for a good reason. Are you Dynamite? He asked after a moment, voice bright and far too loud in the quiet cell. Endeavor's assassin? Bakugo shot him a warning look. Careful, Prince. That mouth is gonna get you killed. So you are. Izuku slumped back against the stone wall, the new information crashing over him like cold water. He had heard rumors about Endeavor's secret right-hand man, whose signature was firework-like explosions. And if he were to go by how the kidnapping took place, he guessed it was this man's doing. Dynamite. The ghost story whispered in every tavern from the northern borders to the southern seas. The shadow who left no footprints, only bodies. Kings hired him. Kings feared him. And now that shadow was sitting 3 feet away, feeding a fire to keep him warm. Izuku rubbed his temples. My head hurts. Good, Bakugo muttered, resuming his sharpening with unnecessary force. Maybe it'll teach you to shut up. They say you killed the Duke of Mizudafu in his own bed without waking his hounds. That you walked through 50 guards in the Red Fortress and left with the general's head in a sack. That you once. Stories, Bakugo cut in, voice flat. People talk too much. Half of it's bullshit. Which half? Bakugo shot him a sharp glare. The part where I give a DMN what people say. Izuku bit his lip, but the questions kept bubbling up. Then why take the name? Dynamite. It's kind of dramatic. I was asked to take one. So Bakugo had a flair for the dramatic. So you picked Dynamite? Not really. They nicknamed me. Izuku tilted his head. You don't sound like someone who enjoys killing. It was a shot in the dark. Izuku's hunches were often right, but he guessed Bakugo was mostly all bark no bite. Still, it was a shot in the dark. This man was, after all, an assassin. You'd be surprised what the full title was then. There's a full title? Bakugo smirked at him. I don't, by the way. Izuku blinked. But you've done it. Yeah. Bakugo's voice was rough, like gravel under boots. Doesn't mean I wake up smiling about it. Most of them deserved it. Some didn't. Job's a job. Izuku pulled his knees closer to his chest, watching the assassin carefully. Then why keep doing it? Bakugo poked the fire harder than necessary, sending embers scattering. You think I had a choice starting out? Kid on the streets doesn't get to pick between assassin or prince. Izuku went quiet at that. The boy, he said after a while. The boy you were talking about. Is it you? Yeah. I'm sorry. Bakugo scoffed. What good will that do? It's just a thing people say. Izuku shrugged helplessly. Izuku picked at a loose thread on his sleeve. Did you find your horse? Bakugo shot him a look. You always ask this many questions? Only when I'm chained to a wall with nothing else to do. Bakugo blinked, clearly not expecting that. No, I did not find her. Oh. Izuku winced in sympathy. I hope she's okay. Me too. You gave her a name? No. Izuku stared at him. You didn't name your horse? No. Izuku's smile grew, small and careful. You're not as scary as the stories make you sound, you know. Do you want me to fix that? Izuku chuckled. A guard shoved a dented tin tray through the bars without ceremony, a lump of grayish porridge congealing beside a hunk of hard bread gone slightly green at the edges. Izuku swallowed hard, stomach twisting in revulsion. He managed a polite nod anyway. Thank you. The guard grunted and walked away. Izuku picked at the food once, hesitated, then set it aside. His stomach cramped painfully, hunger clawing sharp and insistent, but he couldn't make himself eat it. He was a prince after all. Bakugo watched him from across the cell, expression unreadable. Then he stood without a word and walked out. Time dragged and footsteps returned. The cell door creaked open, and suddenly the air filled with the warm, impossible scent of fresh bread and meat and something sweet. Of course, he thought bitterly. Of course Bakugo would go eat something decent. Izuku's chest tightened. He lay back against the wall, staring at the ceiling. His throat closed. For a moment he almost cried. Bakugo dropped down in front of him and pulled something from inside his cloak. Cream buns, still wrapped, and 2 small boxes that smelled so good Izuku's headache cleared. Eat fast. Izuku stared, mouth open. Bakugo rolled his eyes. They're not poisoned, idiot. They're in the DMN packet. He popped open a box, rich, fragrant curry over rice, scooped a spoonful, and ate it himself, happy. That was all it took. Izuku lunged for the food like a starving animal. He didn't even taste the first 3 bites, just shoveled curry and rice and soft, sweet cream buns into his mouth, hands shaking, sauce spilling onto his fingers and the stone floor. Tears blurred his vision, but he didn't care. Days of hunger caught up with him all at once as he swallowed. He finished both boxes and 3 buns in minutes, breathing hard, stomach finally quiet for the first time in days. Bakugo watched him the whole time, silent. Then he leaned forward, plucking the empty boxes from Izuku's sticky hands and picked up the crumbs Izuku had dropped on the floor in his haste and left without a word. Izuku slumped back, dazed and full and achingly grateful, liking sugar from his fingers, wondering if he dreamed it. Bakugo returned with a small tin canister and a cloth mask. He tossed the mask at Izuku. Put it on. Izuku fumbled to obey, and Bakugo immediately started spraying the area around them with sharp-smelling insecticide. A cloud of mist filled the cell. Izuku coughed violently, eyes watering, mask only half on. Bakugo glanced at him, expression flat. "Idiot," he muttered, but he waited until Izuku got the mask properly secured before finishing the job. When he came back the final time, he carried a leather water skin, still cold from outside. He dropped it in Izuku's lap. Izuku stared up at him, throat tight. "Wow," he whispered, voice small. Bakugo looked away, scowling. "What was the point of me spending all that money just for you to throw it all up because you didn't drink water?" Izuku thought it was hardly any amount of money. Still, assassins might not get paid much. He took the flask with both hands. Something warm and fragile bloomed behind his ribs, small, cautious, but undeniably there. He took a long drink of water, eyes never leaving Bakugo's face. "Thank you, Dynamite. The name's Katsuki." "Thank you, Katsuki." Izuku's exhaustion finally pulled him under, the warmth of real food in his belly and the steady crackle of the small fire lulling him into uneasy sleep. He dreamed in fragments, green fields, his mother's worried face, the smell of curry, red eyes watching him in the dark. He woke to voices. "Don't go if he's soft on me, brat." "Todoroki to ya." Izuku instantly recognized his voice. Izuku kept his breathing slow, eyes closed, every sense straining. "I'm not going soft and you know it." That one was unmistakably Bakugo. Izuku's heart jumped at the sound. "Then you should have just forced him." "It was none of my business. Besides, you weren't even supposed to do that, you idiot." Bakugo's voice was a tight snarl, anger barely leashed. "Escoftius." Boots crunched away down the corridor. Silence returned, and Izuku heard the cell door scrape open. "Quick," Bakugo muttered, yanking the door wider. "Get up." Izuku sat up slowly, rubbing circulation back into his hands. Bakugo stood over him, face grim, eyes avoiding his. Izuku's heart slammed. What happened? Bakugo's jaw worked. "The food. The prison slop they brought you, it was poisoned. Tuya was wondering why you weren't already puking your guts out." Izuku froze. Bakugo finally looked at him, expression grim. "I gave it to the rats. Had a hunch. I was right." The room tilted. Izuku's hands trembled, he stared at him in horror, skin going cold. "But I thought they didn't want to kill me. They need leverage." "They don't," Bakugo cut in, voice flat. "The king doesn't. Todoroki is just a madman." Izuku swallowed hard, his stomach twisting painfully at how close it had been. He hugged his arms to himself, shaking. "Where are you taking me now?" Bakugu was already pulling him toward the door. "To the king. He asked for you." Izuku nodded dully, pushing himself to his feet. His legs felt like water. They stepped into the dim corridor together, torches flickering in iron sconces, shadows stretching long and jagged. The air was colder here, damp stone and old blood. Just before they turned the corner toward the throne hall, Bakugu's hand shot out and clamped around Izuku's arm. He yanked Izuku close, voice a rough whisper against his ear. "Listen. Whatever they ask, just tell them. Don't fight it. Don't play hero." Izuku's breath caught and he looked up at him, eyes wide. He searched Bakugu's face, but the assassin's expression was stone. "Go." And then Izuku was pushed out into the hall, swallowed by torchlight and stone and the awful knowledge that whatever waited ahead was worse than chains. "My dear prince," King Enji said calmly, almost kindly, "I need you to answer me this. How many guards are posted at the castle gates at any given time?" Izuku did not answer. He was slumped in the corner, wrists bound behind him, head bowed so low his curls hid his face. His breathing was shallow, uneven. Bakugu pursed his lips. He'd been summoned away almost immediately after delivering him to the king, dragged off for some errand that barely registered. When he'd returned, the room had already changed. Izuku was resisting. His white and gold toga that was already filthy from days in the cell hung in ragged strips, soaked dark with water and blood. Long cuts laced both arms from shoulder to wrist, shallow enough not to kill, deep enough to burn with every movement. Lash marks crossed his back and chest in angry red welts, some split open and bleeding freely. Probably a whip or worse. The idiot had fought them. Izuku barely seemed to notice Bakugu now. His head lolled forward, curls plastered to his forehead with sweat and blood. His breathing was shallow, uneven, but when Enji spoke again, Izuku still lifted his head. Still shook it. The ringing started in Bakugu's ears, high and sharp, drowning out everything else. "How many guards?" Enji demanded again, voice clipped now, irritated. Izuku swallowed. His lips split when he spoke. "I told you. I don't know." Enji's smile stretched wider, thin and predatory, the flames along his beard flaring brighter as if feeding on Izuku's desperation. "Think harder, prince." Izuku dragged in a breath that hitched halfway through. His knees shook beneath him, chains biting into bruised skin as he forced himself to stay upright. "I'm serious," he said, the words slurring together despite his effort. "I don't know about the guards. I never cared to learn the number." His voice cracked completely then. "Please," Izuku whispered. "You have to believe me." Enji straightened slowly, the false gentleness gone from his face like a mask ripped away. Heat shimmered off him in waves, making the air in the chamber waver. "I'm afraid belief is a luxury I can't afford." He nodded once to Tuya. "Put him in." Tuya and a masked man seized Izuku by the arms, hauling him upright. He struggled weakly, legs buckling, but their grip was iron. Thick chains, cold, rusted, and heavy were looped around his neck, shoulders, chest, and wrists. Each link clinked like a death knell. The weight dragged him down immediately. His knees hit the stone floor hard enough to split skin. Izuku gasped, trying to breathe under the crushing load, but they didn't give him time. Tuya grabbed a fistful of green hair and yanked his head back while the masked man snapped a final cuff around his ankles, linking everything together so every movement pulled the noose tighter around his throat. Then they lifted him and slammed him into the box. Bakugu knew that inside the box, there was barely any space to breathe, and the prince would have to fight the weight of the chains to keep his mouth above water. "Answer my questions, Prince Izuku, and I will let you out," he said calmly. "How many guards?" "I don't know. I swear." Terror laced his every word. "Just." Bakugu stepped closer despite himself and peered into the tank. All he could see were flashes of white and gold fabric plastered to skin, chains glinting as Izuku disappeared beneath the surface and burst back up again coughing violently. His eyes were wild, unfocused, desperate, and Bakugu found himself unable to meet those eyes. "Let me out." Izuku sobbed, voice cracking. How many? Let me out. Answer me. Let me out. Please. I can't. A sob tore free as the chains pulled him under again. Bubbles exploded upward. His body jerked, legs kicking uselessly against the tank floor. Bakugo had wrung confessions from countless throats, traitors, spies, thieves, even King's favorites. But the screams of terror echoing from the tank were different. Each one clawed straight into Bakugo's skull and hooked there, ripping deeper with every desperate gasp that followed. His hands twitched at his sides, fingers curling with the urge to slam over his ears just to make it stop for 1 second. I need an answer, Enji said, his voice flat and cold, devoid of anything human. Inside the tank, Izuku was barely keeping himself afloat. The chains dragged relentlessly at his shoulders, his strength long since burned away. Only his mouth and nose broke the surface now, each breath a desperate, shuddering pull of air. His earlier screams had dissolved into hoarse, broken sounds that barely carried. Enji waited, patient as a predator who already knew the prey had nowhere left to run. Izuku thrashed. Don't fight it, Prince. Answer me. How many guards? 7, Izuku whispered at last. The words slipped out exhausted, soaked in defeat and dripping with self-loathing. There are 7 guards at the gate during a single shift. A long pause stretched in the damp air. Then Enji's lips curved into a gleeful smile. Very good, Prince. But I'm afraid it's still not enough to get you out of the box. No, wait, Izuku rasped, panic clawing back into his voice. Please. Enji leaned forward slightly. What times do the guards change shifts? The answer came instantly, words tumbling over each other in naked desperation. Every 6 hours. They change every 6 hours. Please, let me out. We know you're lying, Prince. Now tell me. What times? Izuku vanished fully beneath the blood-streaked water, no part of him visible now except the violent disturbance of the surface. 30 seconds. The struggle was still wild, limbs flailing against unyielding metal, water sloshing over the edges in crimson waves. 50 seconds. The movement slowed, jerky now, weaker. His body twisted in one last, agonizing surge toward the surface he couldn't reach. 1 full minute. The thrashing ebbed into faint twitches. Then nothing. Just the slow, sickening drift of chains settling. Enough. The words slipped out of Bakugo, barely a whisper. Enji didn't hear. His voice rolled out, cold and relentless. I need answers. A final eruption of bubbles burst from below. Izuku's last scream, swallowed by water. Bakugo snapped. Enough. He surged forward, ripping the lid off the tank with a metallic shriek and plunging his arms into the freezing water. He grabbed Izuku under the arms and hauled him up with brutal force. Water cascaded everywhere, over Bakugo's uniform, onto the stone floor as Izuku collapsed against him, coughing violently, chains rattling as he essayed in air in broken, choking gasps. Dynamite! Enji roared. What do you think you are doing? He couldn't breathe. Bakugo growled, voice low and shaking with something far more dangerous than fear. His red eyes met Enji's without flinching. You were going to kill him. The chamber went deathly still except for Izuku's wet, wheezing coughs and the drip of water on stone. Tuya's hand drifted toward the knife at his belt. He can't answer you if he is dead. We need the information. We need the prince alive. Enji looked at him with disgust. If you care about the Aldra prince so much, tend to his wounds yourself. Bakugo looked down at a shivering Izuku and glared. 2 guards dragged him back into the dungeons and Bakugo followed. A weak fire crackled in the hearth, throwing unsteady light over the single room. Bakugo knelt by the flames, coaxing them higher with short, angry breaths. He didn't look at Izuku, sprawled on the pile of blankets he'd dragged in from the horses. That's what I told you, he hissed as he tried lighting another fire, voice low and venomous. Give them the DMN information. Izuku's head snapped toward him. Even pale, half-drowned, wrapped in a torn and blood-stiff toga, the look he gave Bakugo was pure fire. I couldn't do that, he screamed. Bakugo stiffened. Calm down. You try calming down, he snarled, voice cracked and hoarse from screaming and swallowing half the tank. They drowned me over and over. Where were you? Bakugo's shoulders stiffened. What do you mean? Where were you? Izuku's words shook harder. Did you just feed me so I'd be healthy enough to feel every second of it? Bakugo's head whipped around, eyes wide. What the F do you mean? Calm down. That's what you did. Izuku's voice rose, breaking on the edges. You wanted me conscious. I should have eaten the poisoned slop at least, then I wouldn't have been awake for it. What the hell are you? You! Izuku shouted, tears spilling sudden and hot down his cheeks. You didn't even stop them. Izuku's face crumpled. The anger drained out of him all at once, leaving only exhaustion and hurt. He curled in on himself, shoulders shaking with silent, wrenching sobs. Where were you? He whispered again, small and broken. Bakugo exhaled through his teeth. He moved closer, kneeling beside the blankets. They called me away, he muttered. He trailed off, jaw tight. Carefully, he reached out and eased the edge of Izuku's soaked toga aside, peeling the blood-crusted fabric from the lash marks and cuts beneath. He winced at the sight, deep red welts crisscrossing ribs and back, some still seeping. Sheet. The word came out soft, almost helpless. I can't heal you. Not properly. Izuku looked away, shoulders trembling beneath the blanket. Bakugo hesitated, then stood abruptly. Wait here. Izuku let out a weak, bitter laugh. Like I can go anywhere. I meant don't try to move, Bakugo said, sharper now. You'll start bleeding again. He grabbed his cloak from the hook by the door and disappeared into the night without another word, leaving the fire popping in the silence and Izuku alone with the sound of his own ragged breathing. Izuku sat alone by the fire, wrapped in warmth that did nothing to stop the shaking, the echo of water still roaring in his ears. The who's who of who's that is poised for the attack. But my bare hands paved their paths. You don't get to tell me about sad. If you wanted me dead, you should have just said chapter text. Dear reader, if it feels like a trap, you're already in one. 2 days of relentless searching had worn the group to the bone. They'd combed every smuggler's tunnel, every abandoned passage, every forgotten trail snaking beneath and around the Endeavor border. They had been searching for 2 days straight, above ground and below it, stopping only long enough to drink melted ice or swallow something dry and tasteless before pushing on again, until Kirishima finally pulled his horse to a halt and said, gently but firmly, that if they didn't stop now they were going to miss things anyway because exhaustion made fools of even determined people. They made camp at dusk on the high moor's wind-whipped grass, scattered boulders, and a thin crust of snow underfoot. The horses stood in a weary circle, heads low. Ida adjusted his glasses, exhaustion etched deep in the lines around his eyes. You're right. We've covered every known entrance. A few hours won't hurt. Shudo melted a slab of ice into a shallow basin for water and Jairu slid off her saddle to stretch, her ears flicking restlessly at every distant sound. That was when Kirishima spotted a flash of brown fur darting between rocks and through the tall grass, silent and quick, and Kirishima brightened despite everything. Hey! He grinned for the first time in days, pointing. Wild rabbit. Fresh meat sounds pretty damn appetizing right now. Ida glanced at the creature, then at their empty saddlebags. Very well. Kill it. Kirishima unslung his short hunting bow, nocked an arrow, and swung down from his horse. Be right back. He slipped off after the rabbit, red hair vanishing into the tall grass. Ida watched him go, frowning. Jairu followed him. No one wanders these moors alone. Minutes passed. The rabbit bolted, veering sharply right across the moor, and Kirishima laughed under his breath and leaned forward, until suddenly the rabbit cut hard again and Kirishima lunged instinctively. Down! Jairu screamed. She came tearing after him, eyes wide, hands outstretched. I hear footsteps. Kirishima barely had time to register the panic in her voice before he ducked, dragging his horse down with him as best he could. They froze. Soon, they both heard the unmistakable sound of hooves. Kirishima lifted his head an inch and squinted. After a second, he straightened. He said, confused. It's just a stray horse. Jairu's face drained of color. That means the people are nearby, she hissed. She peered behind Kirishima. That's no wild horse. Tack's too fine. Kirishima stood slowly, hands raised. Hey, easy. The horse shied but didn't bolt. It looked exhausted, sides heaving, mane matted with burrs, but otherwise looked rather well kept. Kirishima frowned, watching as the horse stepped into view, lean, mud-streaked, tackless, ears pinned back. It snorted and stamped, clearly agitated. It doesn't look like it, Kirishima murmured. It's coming from, he paused. Hey, what's that area? It wasn't on the map. They exchanged a glance, then sprinted back to the others. Jiraiya followed his gaze, then swore softly and grabbed his arm. We need to tell the others. Now. They regrouped quickly, roasted the unfortunate rabbit over a low fire without much appetite, and listened as Kirishima and Jiraiya explained, Shudo going still at the mention of the unmapped land, and Ida growing increasingly tense. Then they followed the stray horse. It led them unerringly toward the unmarked ravine, ears pricked, refusing to let them fall behind. But 20 paces from the treeline, it stopped dead, snorting, stamping, eyes wide with terror. When they rode toward the area, the stray horse disappeared again almost immediately, and just as immediately darted back, rearing and snorting until its hooves tore up the grass. Ida dismounted, kneeling to inspect the ground. His fingers brushed flattened grass, broken branches, and then a shape. He froze. There, pressed deep into the soil, was a print that made his stomach drop, the shape wrong in a way that set every instinct screaming. The mark was huge, longer than his forearm, part human foot, part clawed paw. Toes too long, heel too deep, edges ragged like something had dug in while running on all fours. Everyone, he said quietly, standing too fast, turn back. Now. Kirishima swallowed. Ida? I don't know what that is, Ida said, voice tight, but it is not something we are equipped to face. The horse whinnied, refusing to follow as they retreated a few steps. Jiraiya, who'd always had a soft spot for horses, watched it tremble. Guys, I think it's trying to get us to go in. It's scared, but it keeps looking that way. The horse stamped again, circling them, snorting insistently, tugging at invisible reins. Shoto's mismatched eyes narrowed at the dark trees. Something's in there. Something that terrified this animal. Against better judgment, against every rational instinct, they went. Ida lifted Chio into his arms without argument. He was the strongest, and she was already pale with fatigue, and the horse moved ahead, guiding them not along any path but through wild, uneven ground, as if it knew exactly where to place its hooves. We've come this far for the boys. We go forward or we never forgive ourselves. Ida swallowed, adjusted his grip on the elderly healer, and nodded. They rode for what seemed to be nearly an hour. Then, a low, guttural growl rumbled through the underbrush ahead. Yellow eyes gleamed between trunks. Ida stopped. A shadowy shape, half man, half beast crouched on a fallen log, claws flexing, muzzle dripping. A werewolf. It was massive. Taller than any man on horseback, shoulders hunched forward, fur matted black and gray, claws glinting like polished steel in the fractured moonlight. Yellow eyes fixed on them with predatory intelligence, lips peeling back from fangs that dripped saliva onto the snow. Fear hit them all at once, visceral and paralyzing. They ran. Jiraiya's hand flew to her mouth, clamping down so hard her teeth bit into her palm. A scream was trying to rip its way out of her, her ears ringing so badly she could barely tell which sounds were real anymore and which were just her own blood rushing too loud. A muffled whimper escaped anyway. Ida, steady, responsible Ida felt his heart slam against his ribs so hard he thought they might crack. Chio clung to his back, tiny fingers digging into his armor like claws, her own breath hitching in sharp little gasps against his neck. His mind raced through protocols, escape routes, defenses, and came up empty. All he could do was wheel his horse around and bellow, voice cracking with uncharacteristic panic. Run! The word shattered the spell. The stray horse somehow stayed with them, guiding sharp turns, leaping fallen trees, leading them through the maze of the forest as if it knew every route. The other horses bolted in blind terror, hooves churning snow and mud. Branches whipped faces and snatched at cloaks. The werewolf's roar chased them, close, closer. Hot breath almost felt on their heels. Every crash in the underbrush sounded like the beast gaining. They didn't dare look back. Kirishima's hardened fists gripped the reins white-knuckled, his whole body shaking with adrenaline and sheer animal fear. They didn't think, didn't even shout, trusting the horse blindly as it veered sharply, led them through brush that tore at their clothes and skin, hooves pounding a frantic rhythm. Branches snapped and breaths burned. Somewhere behind them, something howled. Eventually they seemed to nearing a clearing, and there seemed to be nobody behind them anymore. "Stop," Chio said suddenly, her voice urgent and a little breathless. Ida tugged at the reins. She slid down from Ida's arms and knelt, brushing her fingers through the grass. "Look," she said softly. "Blood." She plucked one leaf free and stood. "This way." They ran again, slower now, more careful, until the trees thinned and a small cabin emerged from the gloom, half-hidden, crooked, smoke long gone from its chimney. They burst inside, slamming it behind them, barricading with a heavy bench. Dust and the sharp tang of herbs filled the air. Shelves lined the walls, strange jars glinting in the dim light. Pickled roots, dried organs, liquids glowing faintly green and red. Books were scattered on the table. For a moment, no one spoke. Only the wind howled outside, and the ragged sound of their breathing filled the small space. Jairu's back pressed against the wall, one hand clamped so tightly over her mouth that her knuckles had gone white. Her earphone jacks trembled, still extended, listening for any hint of pursuit. Her eyes were wide, dark and glistening, darted to the single grimy window, then to the door, then to the floor, as if the werewolf might burst through any surface at any second. She wasn't the only one. Kirishima stood beside the barricade, chest heaving, hardened skin still active in patchy plates across his arms and face, his body's instinctive armor refusing to drop even now. His usual easy grin was gone. In its place was something raw and shaken. His free hand hovered near his sword hilt, fingers twitching like he needed to hold something solid to believe they'd actually escaped. "All clear," Ida said, having checked every room in the tiny house. Jairu finally lowered her hand from her mouth, but it still trembled as she wrapped her arms around herself. "I've never," she whispered, voice cracking. "I've never heard anything like that. Its heartbeat, it wasn't right." Kirishima swallowed hard, forcing a shaky breath. "Okay, we're inside." It didn't follow. But his words sounded hollow even to himself. Shoto finally spoke, voice low. "It let us go." The implication landed like a stone in still water. "Do you think Izuku was here?" "We're about to find out," Chio said, looking at the crushed leaves with blood on it. They slumped down against the old wall. This is the prince, no doubt." Jairu gasped. "Less than a day old. Maybe hours. What do we do now?" Kirishima turned to Jairu and Ida. "We have to inform the king," Ida said, "and tell him that we can't continue our search anymore." Jairu nodded. "Let's rest the horses for a bit. We'll ride at dawn." Kirishima kept first watch. But the day's tiredness caught up with him, and soon they were all fast asleep. They woke tangled together on the cabin floor, wrists bound and ankles looped close enough that any movement dragged the others with it, the rough rope biting into skin, and the first thing Jairu registered before the ache, before the fear, was the feeling of being watched. A girl crouched in front of them, elbows resting on her knees. She wore a pink mask that covered most of her face, smooth and bright against the dim wood, but it was the eyes that made Jairu's breath hitch. Dark black and yellow, they stared down at her. "Good morning." Jairu nudged Ida awake. "Who are you guys?" the girl asked. Ida straightened as much as the ropes allowed, posture snapping into place on pure instinct. "We're travelers," he said evenly. "Just passing by." The girl tilted her head. "Passing through from where?" "The west," Ida said smoothly. Her stare intensified. "I know you're lying." Jairu sighed from her spot beside Shoto. "There's no reason for us to," she said. "It's true, we're not from here. But we're not here to cause trouble." The girl sighed, rubbing at her forehead. "Yeah, I know. I checked all your bags while you were out cold." She gestured to their neatly stacked gear in the corner, seals broken, contents rifled. Camping's fun and all, but this area's crawling with werewolves. You can't just wander in here. Ida nodded quickly. We were camping. We were hunting a rabbit. It led us here. The girl rubbed her temples with gloved fingers. Even her gloves were pink, Jairu noted. Shudo shifted beside Ida. Who are you? She flashed a sudden, sharp smile. Ishido. Mina Ishido. Are you from the Endeavor Kingdom? Shudo asked. Mina sighed again, longer this time. Kind of. Ida nudged Shudo sharply with his shoulder, a silent don't, and Mina watched the exchange with mild amusement. I honestly don't know what to do with you, she went on, mostly to herself. I was told this place would be empty. We can leave. Ida said at once, voice earnest. Right now. You don't have to worry about us. We'll go and never speak of this. Mina's lips curved into a smirk. She reached up and pulled the pink mask off entirely, revealing the rest of her face, pretty, heart-shaped, with those same unsettling yellow eyes now fully visible. Leave where? She asked almost sweetly. There's no way out of this valley unless you know the area well. How did you even get here? Jairu glanced around, then hesitated. There was a horse. Mina's entire posture changed. She straightened, eyes lighting up with sudden interest. A horse, you say? Jairu nodded. Yeah. It doesn't look like it's here anymore, though. Huh. She leaned back, considering them. Tell you what. Find the horse for me, and I'll let you go. No questions asked. Ida exchanged looks with the others, then nodded. That seems reasonable. But we need something from you too. Mina pet her head, amused. And why exactly would I do anything for you? Shudo glared. You're outnumbered. Mina's smirk widened, showing small, sharp teeth. Oh, you think I can't handle all 6 of you? Shudo bristled, but Kirishima cut in quickly, voice earnest. Please. We're just looking for our friend. We don't want to fight. Mina paused, then studied him properly, eyes brightening in a way that made Jairu uneasy. Okay, she said finally. Decide among yourselves. I'm gonna get something to eat. She turned and slipped out the door, silent as smoke, leaving them alone in the dusty cabin. Ida exhaled. All right, he whispered. We ask her about them. Carefully. Describe them, don't name anyone. Jairu shot Shudo a look. And don't pick a fight. I wasn't trying to, Shudo muttered. Yeah, Jairu snapped. We know that. She doesn't. Kirishima sighed dreamily, staring at the door. Is it just me, or is she kind of? Jairu turned to him, unimpressed. Now is not the time. Mina came back with an armful of wild fruit and untied them. She handed each of them a portion of grayish, uneven-looking food that made Jairu wrinkle her nose on instinct. Ida caught the first one she tossed him. He turned it over, sniffed it discreetly, then gave the group a small, firm nod, the signal they all trusted without question. If Ida said it was safe, it was safe. Kirishima hadn't waited. He'd already bitten into his tuber, chewing thoughtfully. Kinda earthy. Not bad. Mina burst out laughing. Kirishima squinted at her mid-bite. You wouldn't poison us, would you? Mina sighed, flopping onto a stool. Oh, I actually do really need your help, you guys. She rubbed the back of her neck and leaned back against the table. I've never seen that horse before, and he gave me no details. Ida nodded. Don't worry. We've seen it. Kirishima's ears caught the pronoun immediately. He. Your boyfriend? He added with a teasing grin. Mina laughed outright, loud and genuine, the sound filling the dusty cabin. Oh no. No. Just an idiot friend. She dropped her voice into a gruff, exaggerated imitation. It's a horse, Pinky. Why do I need to describe a horse to you, Pinky? There aren't many horses here, so if you find one, you should rescue it anyway. Jairu found herself smiling despite everything. Well, she said, he was wrong. You found 5 other horses. Exactly, Mina said, pointing at her. Anyway, I'm also very not into horses, so I kind of don't want to catch it. Shudo seized the opening. Of course we'll help. Mina's expression softened. Thank you. She leaned forward. So what did you guys need in return? Ida spoke carefully. We need to find our friend. Mina hummed. Describe him. Jiraiya glanced at Ida. He gave the slightest nod. Well, Jiraiya began, he has green hair, green eyes. Lots of freckles. Probably traveling with a dark-haired man, taller, rougher looking. Mina frowned, thinking hard. Then she shook her head. Nope. Doesn't ring a bell. But I'll ask around. She stood when they were all done eating, brushing dirt and crumbs from her pants. A few of you can look for the horse. One of you can come with me and search if you want. Jiraiya rose beside him, stretching stiff limbs. Kirishima was already on his feet. I'll go with you, Mississippi. Ashido. I'll go with you, Ashido. Shoto opened his mouth, probably to volunteer too, but Kirishima shot him a quick look. Shoto sat back down. Mina shrugged. All right, let's move. The group split quickly. Ida and Jiraiya headed off to look for the horse, while Mina stood and motioned for Kirishima to follow her. Mina led Kirishima along a narrow deer path, pink skin almost glowing in the weak winter light. After a few minutes of comfortable silence, she glanced sideways. So, tell me more about this friend of yours. Kirishima didn't hesitate. He's honestly one of the loveliest people I know. Kind to a fault. Kirishima couldn't help remembering Izuku, sneaking through the castle at night with socks on his hands because he'd read somewhere that it helped muffle sound. Izuku, absolutely convinced he could outsmart every guard despite being terrible at lying. He remembered Izuku laughing in the stables, hair wind-tangled, cheeks flushed from riding too fast, talking excitedly about how horses remembered kindness, how if you treated them gently they'd always come back to you. Remembered him dangling his legs over a balcony, passing bread to birds, insisting it was important royal diplomacy. The idea of that boy dragged through mud and fire, hurt badly enough to leave traces like this, made Kirishima's chest ache. Hang in there, buddy, he thought fiercely. We're coming. I swear. Ashido smiled at him. Go on. One of the finest friends I've ever had. Most kind-hearted person you'll ever meet, always thinking about everyone else first. Stubborn as hell when it comes to doing the right thing. He's got this smile that just makes everything feel possible, you know? And he's brave. Ridiculously brave. He always believes people can be better, even when they don't deserve it. He laughed awkwardly, scratching the back of his neck. Sorry. He's just been missing a long time, and we all love him. Mina listened without interrupting, yellow eyes steady on the path ahead. Don't worry. And the other man? Mina asked gently. He's like a teacher to us, Kirishima said, voice softening. It's been really hard without them. Mina nodded, expression sober. I'm sorry. He sounds like a wonderful person. Both of them. Kirishima trudged through the snow-dusted forest beside Mina, boots crunching, mind half on the burnt grass patches and half drifting somewhere warmer back to the palace, back to easier days. He smiled to himself, small and fond. There was that one time, Izuku couldn't have been more than 15 when he decided the castle needed a grand treasure hunt to cheer everyone up after a long winter. He'd hidden little notes and trinkets all over the place, in the library rafters, inside the knight's spare helmets, even tucked one behind the king's throne cushion. All Might found it weeks later and laughed so hard he nearly cried. But the best part was the finale. Izuku had rigged a ridiculous dragon's hoard in the old East Tower, piles of shiny stones, gold-painted rocks, and a big wooden chest full of honey cakes. He'd convinced half the staff to play along, dressing up as guardians with paper wings and flour sack masks. Kirishima still remembered bursting into the tower with the others, only to find Izuku perched on top of the chest in a makeshift cape, brandishing a broom like a sword, shouting, "None shall claim the treasure without besting the mighty dragon." He'd lasted about 10 seconds before Kaminari tackled him, Siro taped his arms to his sides, and Kirishima himself hoisted the mighty dragon over one shoulder while Izuku kicked and laughed so hard he couldn't breathe. They'd eaten every single honey cake that night, sprawled on the tower floor, covered in crumbs and glitter from whatever craft supplies Izuku had raided. "I'll try looking for him, I swear." Kirishima smiled at her, genuine, warm. "Thanks. That means a lot." He hesitated, then asked, "What about you? You said, kind of, from Endeavor." Mina shrugged, kicking a pebble. "I didn't grow up there. Someone found me wandering alone when I was little, half-starved, no memory of where I came from. Took me in, fed me, kept me safe for a while. Then they discovered what I can do with my acid. Word got to the king. He offered money, food, protection, important necessities in exchange for helping him sometimes." Kirishima nodded quickly. "Yeah, I get it. Survival's not always pretty." Mina gave him a small, grateful smile. Mina stopped suddenly, crouching. "Someone was here," she said quietly. She brushed aside ash and scorched leaves. The grounds burned. Hayes stared at each other for a long moment, the forest suddenly feeling very small around them. Mina exhaled. "Come on. Let's keep moving. We might not be the only ones looking anymore." They looked around for hours but found no trace of anything else. They returned at dusk, boots dragging, shoulders sagging with exhaustion. For a heartbeat, Kirishima let himself hope that Ida or Jairu would come back with something. But when Ida and Jairu emerged from the treeline, shaking their heads, the last spark of that hope guttered out. "No sign of the horse," Ida said quietly. "We searched every trail we could find. It's gone." Jairu rubbed her arms against the cold. "Like it vanished into thin air." Ashido muttered something under her breath and, after a moment, wandered off toward the trees to gather more food, humming faintly to herself like she always did when thinking. The moment she was out of earshot, Ida straightened and motioned them closer, voice dropping to a whisper sharp with urgency. "We got word from the king," he whispered urgently. "A pigeon reached us while we were out. Uraraka and Tsuyu confirmed Izuku is being held in Endeavor's palace. They're staying low to watch for movement. We need to ride for assistance. Now." Shoto's mismatched eyes narrowed. "How? Ashido's here." Ida nodded hurriedly. "Exactly. All of us will ride back together, except Kirishima. You stay with her, under the guise of still searching for the horse, and for Izuku. We'll gear up properly in Aldra, drop Chiyo-sama safely at the palace, and return with reinforcements." Kirishima met his gaze steadily. "Got it." When Mina returned, arms full of winter roots and a few frozen apples, the group was already packing. Jairu winced as she spoke up. "Our parents. They're looking for us. We've been gone too long." Ashido frowned. "All of you? Kirishima's staying to help you with the horse and our friend, if that's okay?" Ashido looked between them, then back to Kirishima. "And your parents?" she asked him. Kirishima sent a silent, guilty prayer skyward to his very much alive, very loving parents back in Aldra and said, without blinking, "They're dead." Mina's sharp expression softened instantly. "Oh, sorry." Kirishima shrugged, sending another silent apology heavenward. "Don't be. They were bad people." Shoto blinked, vaguely confused, but said nothing. Mina hesitated only a moment longer, then sighed. "All right, I'll guide you to the main road in the morning. It's the safest way out." The next morning dawned cold and gray, frost glittering on every branch like scattered diamonds. The four riders, Ida, Shoto, Jairu, and Chiyo, were already saddled and waiting when Mina and Kirishima emerged from the cabin, rubbing sleep from their eyes. Mina carried a small bundle of leftover roots and berries, which she handed out without ceremony. "Breakfast on the road," she said. "You'll need it." When the sun finally cleared the treetops, Mina led them out the same twisting paths as the night before, but now in daylight they could see how cleverly hidden the valley was. Sheer rock faces, overgrown ravines, false trails that looped back on themselves. Kirishima rode at the rear with Mina walking beside his horse, guiding the way. Every so often he glanced back at the others, memorizing the route in case he needed to bring reinforcements later. They reached the main trade road just as the sun climbed high enough to burn off the mist. Here the parting. Ida dismounted first, adjusting his cracked glasses and offering Mina a formal bow, deep and respectful. "Thank you for your hospitality, and for guiding us." Shoto nodded, silent but sincere. Jairu gave a small wave, Jax twitching nervously. The goodbyes were brief, hurried, heavy with everything they couldn't say. As the others mounted their horses, Ida leaned close to Kirishima and murmured, "I know you're staying for the girl, but keep a lookout." Kirishima nodded once. "Of course. Dear reader, get out your map, pick somewhere and just run chapter text. Dear reader, bend when you can, snap when you have to." The healer arrived a few moments later. They didn't speak to Izuku when they unlocked his chains, didn't meet his eyes when they hauled him to his feet and steered him down the corridor toward the infirmary. Their hands were brisk, efficient, impersonal, like he was a task to be completed rather than a person who could still feel every jolt of pain with each step. Every step was agony. The lash marks across his back had scabbed badly, pulling and splitting with movement. His ribs throbbed where the chains had bitten deepest. He limped, leaning heavily on the woman's arm, trying not to cry out. As they passed a heavy oak door on the upper floor, Izuku heard a sound through it. A soft, broken, unmistakably human noise. A girl's whimper. Then a choked sob as if muffled. It came from one of the side rooms, a door half hidden behind a pillar. Izuku's blood turned to ice. His stomach coiled tight with dread. He stumbled deliberately, letting his knee buckle so he sagged against the wall near the door. "Keep moving," the healer snapped, yanking him upright. The healer hissed in irritation, fingers biting into his arm as they yanked him upright, dragging him along. Izuku craned his head, straining to listen, heart pounding so loud he thought it might give him away. But he'd heard it again, another sob, higher, terrified. The healer dragged him onward. In the infirmary, the healing was cursory at best. A few rough stitches pulled too tight. Herbs pressed into wounds without cleaning them first. No numbing salve, no gentle touch. When Izuku hissed in pain, the woman only shrugged. "Wait here," she said finally, setting a small jar on the table. "I'll fetch the soothing salve." The door clicked shut behind her. Izuku forced himself to his feet the minute she left, swaying, and shuffled back into the corridor. The sobbing door was only a few paces away. He eased it open just a crack. In the dim light of a single candle, he saw a small girl, no more than 10 or 11, with tangled blue hair, curled on a narrow cot. Her face was buried in her arms, shoulders shaking with silent, exhausted crying. Thin wrists bore bruise marks from restraints. Izuku's heart cracked open. Panic surged when he heard the hurried sound of footsteps. He turned too fast, pain stealing his balance, and he went down hard. The healer rounded the corner, fury written sharp across her face. "You little—" She seized his arm and hauled him bodily down the hall, ignoring his gasps of pain. Back in the dungeon, she flung him onto the straw. "No salve for disobedient brats," she spat, and slammed the cell door. Alone again, Izuku curled on his side, tears burning hot tracks down his cheeks. Minutes or hours later, the door opened again. Bakugu stepped in, face dark with barely contained rage. His eyes swept the cell, landing on Izuku's trembling form. "The F-dash," he growled. "I told you not to move." Izuku pushed himself up, scrambling to the bars. "Katsuki." Bakugu unlocked the door and strode in, forcing Izuku back down and guiding him onto the thinner blanket instead of cold stone. Izuku grabbed Bakugu's sleeve with shaking fingers, voice urgent and cracked. "There's a girl upstairs. In one of the rooms. They're keeping a little girl there. She was crying." Bakugu went very still. "What?" "I swear I saw her. Blue hair." Bakugu's expression clouded, something dangerous flickering behind red eyes. "I'll check." Then, sharper, "Why were you even upstairs?" "They took me to stitch me up," Izuku said weakly. Bakuga's eyes flicked over him, anger flaring hotter. "They did a sheet job." Silence stretched. Then Bakugu exhaled hard. "I called in a healer from outside," he said quietly. "They'll come after the guards finish their rounds. Just hold on a little longer." Bakugu pulled a small clay jar from his cloak. "Bought this. It's supposed to help the pain." Izuku could barely look at him, fear, gratitude, exhaustion all tangled together. Bakugu uncorked the jar. The scent was clean and minty. like something gentle. He dipped his fingers and began applying it carefully, over the worst lashes on Izuku's back, the rope burns on his wrists, the deep bruises. Along his ribs. His hands, although calloused, scarred, capable of so much violence, were impossibly gentle. Slow circles, feather-light pressure, made sure every torn place was covered. Izuku's breathing evened out despite himself. The pain dulled to a distant ache and his sobs quietened. By the time he finished, Izuku's eyes had drifted shut. Exhaustion and relief pulled him under, breath softening into the slow rhythm of sleep. Bakugo stayed a moment longer, watching the rise and fall of Izuku's bandaged chest. Izuku drifted in and out of restless sleep, the salve dulling the worst of the pain but not the memory of it. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the blue-haired girl's small, shaking form. Every time he woke, the cell felt colder, darker. Night finally fell, deep, moonless, and Izuku wished Aizawa was here to keep him company. The cell door opened with the softest click. A tall figure slipped inside, broad-shouldered, blonde hair catching the faint glow of a shielded lantern. His smile was bright, too bright for a dungeon, eyes kind and steady. "Hi there," he whispered cheerfully. "Name's Mirio." Izuku cracked an eye open. The man crouched beside him, all warm smiles and kind eyes, completely out of place in the dungeon's gloom. "I'm here to fix you right up, okay? I'm here to fix you right up." Before Izuku could even respond, Mirio was already working, his hands steady and movements confident. Whatever he did, it was leagues beyond the rough patchwork he'd been given earlier. The pain ebbed and then faded. Then, astonishingly, was just gone. Izuku felt his body tingle, and Mirio's hands chased the pain away like sunlight burning off fog. When Mirio finally leaned back, Izuku sat up gingerly, bracing for the familiar flare of agony. "Nothing." "Oh," he breathed, stunned. "Oh, thank you. Thank you, thank you." Mirio's grin widened. He pulled a cloth-wrapped bundle from his satchel, unfolding it to reveal steaming bread, roasted meat, soft cheese, and even a small honey cake. The smell alone made Izuku's mouth water. "I was told to bring all this in," Mirio said kindly. Izuku ate, smiling between bites, the simple act of food and relief making his chest feel lighter than it had in days. The cell door opened and Bakugo stepped in, eyes immediately snapping to Izuku on his feet. "Ah, you're here already. Prince, are you good?" Izuku nodded happily, mouth full. "Better than all right. Mirio's amazing." Bakugo nodded as he sat down. "There's no door behind the pillars upstairs," he said quietly. "I checked. There's nothing there. What exactly did you see?" Izuku's happiness faltered. He leaned forward urgently. "No, there is. I heard her crying, I saw her." Bakugo crossed his arms. "And I'm telling you, there's nothing there." Mirio cut in gently. "Pain can do strange things. Hallucinations aren't uncommon." "No," Izuku said, sharp and certain. "I wasn't imagining it. They're keeping a girl there." Bakugo sighed. "I wasn't delirious." Izuku protested, voice rising. "I know what I saw." Bakugo sighed, rubbing his temple. "Calm down. I believe you. That's not the question. How did you end up finding that door in the first place?" Mirio raised a gentle hand. "If I make dynamite, I can check." Bakugo stared at him. "I have no more money for you." Mirio smiled. "Consider it a favor. A child's life might be at stake." And then he simply slid forward, passing through the stone wall like it wasn't there at all. Izuku gawked. Bakugo jerked his chin. "Yeah, he can do that. Comes in real handy." Izuku stared after Mirio, then looked back. "Was he expensive?" "Very," Bakugo said bluntly. Then quieter, "which is why you should just give them information next time." Izuku shot him a half-hearted glare. "Would you sell out your friends?" Bakugo shrugged. "I don't have friends." Izuku frowned. "No one? Not even that Tuya guy?" Bakugo's expression twisted in disgust. "He's one of the most despicable humans I know. And I've met all kinds of people. Pretty sure he's neck-deep in the mafia." Bakugo nodded. "Yeah. I just need proof." Izuku circled back stubbornly. There's really no one you trust? There's no one I wouldn't sell out if I was locked in, Bakugo said flatly. But friends, Izuku pressed gently. Surely there are friends? Bakugo shrugged again, voice quieter when he said, maybe. But they're only my friends because they owe me. Izuku studied him, head tilted. Bet you have loads of friends, Bakugo said suddenly, almost challenging. Izuku's face lit up. I do. There's Aijuru, he's the best. Red hair, huge smile, can harden his skin like armor. Always positive even when everything's awful. And then there's Yashiro. He launched into a fond description. Shudo's so monotone, you'd think he's bored all the time, but he has the coolest magic. People stared at him weird because of his funny hair and the birthmark, but he's actually really sweet. Funny hair? Why, did he dye it or something? Nope. Izuku said proudly. That's the coolest part. It's literally half red, half white everywhere. Even his chest hair. Bakugo straightened fully. The birthmark. Is it around his left eye? Yes, Izuku said slowly. How did you know? Bakugo didn't answer. He started pacing the small cell, hands clenched, expression unreadable. Prince, he started after a while. His tone was different. Does he live in the palace with you? Izuku nodded, confused. Yeah. Why? Bakugo stopped and sat heavily on the stool and went very quiet. They were silent for a long time. The wall shimmered. Mirio phased back through, face grim. There was no trace of his earlier brightness. There's a girl all right, he said softly. Blue hair like you said. Hidden room under heavy enchantments. Bakugo nodded and left without a word. Dear reader, you don't have to answer, just 'cause they asked you chapter text. Dear reader, the greatest of luxuries is your secrets. The council chamber was thick with smoke from the braziers and the low heat of Enji's barely contained flames. The long table was scattered with maps of Aldra's borders, marked in red where soldiers had vanished. Tuya lounged at one end, scarred fingers drumming idly. Bakugo stood before the king, arms folded, face unreadable. How much longer do you plan on keeping the prince and the general? Until we have the information we need. And then? Depends on how the war ends. If Aldra is no more, Enji laughs gleefully, there will be no point in sending them home. Tia smirked, and if they are, then we kill them off for revenge. Enji's chair scraped back as he leaned forward. They've taken too many of our soldiers. Once we know their defenses, we declare war. Bakugo nodded. Then, finally, I have information on Todoroki Shudo. Enji stood so fast his chair scraped back and toppled. Flames roared up his arms. What? He barked. Bakugo met his gaze steadily. But if I promise to bring him to you, you let the prince and the general go. Enji's eyes narrowed to burning slits. What exactly have you learned? He goes by Yashiro now, Bakugo said. His hair is dyed black, and he lives in the palace. I bet they have him chained in the dungeons. Bakugo shook his head. I don't think so. But I'm not sure. Enji's lip curled. So you made a deal with the prince? Bakugo shook his head. No. I overheard him talking to himself. Enji threw his head back and laughed, harsh, triumphant. The prince is going mad already. He'll break soon enough. Bakugo inclined his head, expression neutral. Enji leaned forward, palms flat on the table. Good work, Dynamite. Now go. Comb the Aldra Palace yourself. Get me everything without them knowing you were ever there. Bakugo turned and left without another word. He flew hard and fast, cutting through the sky until half a day blurred into a single stretch of cold wind and aching muscles. By the time the palace rose beneath him, white stone glowing in the afternoon light, his jaw was set so tight it hurt. He moved through the halls like a shadow, ducking behind pillars, slipping through servant passages, listening, watching. He looked for the dungeons. Then chambermaids' laughing voices echoed down a corridor. He slipped through the nearest door to avoid them and found himself in the bedroom? Almost immediately he noticed the atrocious color of the carpet. Who the F wanted a neon green shade for a carpet? He thought. His eyes landed on the small framed photograph hanging above the desk. Izuku younger, maybe 16, grinning wide beside a gentle-faced woman with the same green hair and kind eyes who was clearly his mother. But she could easily be mistaken for his sister, Bakugo thought, had he not known that there was no princess to the Aldera throne. Both of them were laughing at something off-camera, arms around each other. Bakugo stared longer than he meant to. Then he shook his head sharply and moved to the window, ready to leap out. He remembered the first time he'd been here. The night of the masquerade. He'd slipped in disguised as a minor lord's guard, eyes scanning for the prince. His eyes swept the crowd, and then lifted to the staircase. He stopped dead. Descending with his head high and shoulders back was a young man. He was stunning. His robe of white and gold caught the light, shimmering with every step, and the mask he wore added an otherworldly elegance. Dark green hair fell in loose waves, catching the light like forest leaves after rain. Freckles dusted across his cheeks like scattered stars. His eyes were laughing and Bakugo's breath caught. Standing just behind him was a taller man, alert and tense, his presence dull against the boy in front of him. Bakugo sobered in an instant as he recognized General Aizawa. The man was Prince Izuku. He was almost tempted to abandon the mission entirely. To turn around, slip out the way he'd come, and pretend he'd never seen those eyes. The thought shocked him. What the hell was wrong with him? He gave himself a hard mental shake, forcing his gaze away from the prince and back to the guards below. Now he wondered what would have happened if he had followed his instinct. He compared the image of Izuku at the masquerade to the one in the dungeons. One would think the difference would be remarkable. Bakugo jumped. The light behind his eyes weren't gone yet, and in that moment Bakugo decided he wouldn't let it go out. Bakugo scoured the palace for hours, weaving through shadowed corridors and unused wings, but the dungeons remained elusive if they existed at all. They were masterfully concealed. Frustration gnawed at him as he finally pulled back, wings cutting through the air against his better judgment. Had Izuku lied? No, he shook his head. That was impossible. By the time the moon began to sink, exhaustion and frustration burned hotter than his explosions. Against every instinct screaming at him to stay, to rest a little, he launched himself from a high balcony and flew back toward Endeavor, blasts carrying him through the pre-dawn cold. Disappointment sat heavy in his gut, but his mind raced with ideas to get the prince out of there. The palace was a fortress, but Bakugo knew his way in and out like nobody else. Still, with Mirio's help this could all be done a lot quicker. He made a quick stop at the small, half-forgotten house tucked into the edge of the moor, landing lightly on the roof before slipping down to the door, knocking once and then not waiting, because waiting was a luxury he didn't have. He slid a folded note into the crack and weighing it down with a stone, hoping Pinky to be back before morning, because if she wasn't, then one more thread of this fragile plan would snap, and he couldn't afford to lose any more time than he already had. He landed once again in the outer courtyard as the first pale light touched the red stone walls. Guards nodded warily as he passed. No one questioned Dynamite's comings and goings anymore. The council chamber doors were already open. Enji sat alone at the long table, flames low but steady, studying a new map of Aldera's western border. Bakugo stopped in the doorway. No sign of Todoroki. He's not in any accessible area. He reported his failure. King Enji rubbed his chin, eyes narrowing in thought. Wherever he remains well hidden. Clever boy. He paused, then straightened. What then? I have an idea. Bakugo bristled but remained silent as Enji dismissed him, his mind already spinning through his next moves. Dear reader, burn all the files, desert all your past lives. And if you don't recognize yourself, that means you did it right. Chapter text. You should find another guiding light. Guiding light. But I shine so bright. Ashido and Kirishima slipped through the gates of Endeavor, the early morning light casting long shadows across the cobblestones. The guards recognized her instantly and waved them through with bored nods. Kirishima kept his hood low, but his broad grin peeked out every time he glanced sideways at her. The journey had been rather quiet, filled with the sound of hooves and the occasional word exchanged, and when Mina guided them down a narrow side street, past blacksmith forges still glowing with dying coals, to a small, unassuming house tucked behind a row of storehouses, tucked away near the edge of the woods, It felt like stepping into a world apart. Kirishima swung down from his horse first, offering her a hand with that easy, eager smile. She took it, hopping lightly to the ground, and for a second their fingers lingered. "This is pretty," Kirishima said. Mina felt something unfamiliar flutter in her chest. She busied herself lighting the hearth, but she could feel his eyes on her, warm and steady. There was something about him so rough around the edges, yet entirely earnest, that made her chest feel lighter than it had in years. For a fleeting moment she thought, maybe her time had come, maybe she would finally meet a man who wasn't cruel, a man she could trust, and leave this godforsaken place behind. He hovered close without crowding, his gaze softened every time she spoke. And God, it was nice. For once, someone looked at her like she was something worth staying for, not a tool or a monster, just Mina. Kirishima rolled up his sleeves without being asked. "I can make a good roast," he claimed, already rummaging through her small pantry like he belonged there. "Back home I was the grill master. Rabbit, venison, whatever you name it." He moved with easy familiarity around the small kitchen, fetching ingredients, chopping, stirring, and all the while Ashido found herself watching him, allowing herself the luxury of calm, the luxury of happiness. She handed him a knife, bumped his shoulder playfully as they worked side by side, chopping roots, seasoning meat she'd snagged from a market stall earlier, laughing when he flexed dramatically while turning the spit. The roast sizzled, the smell warming the small space, and soon they were sharing a meal, laughing over burnt edges and overly seasoned vegetables, and then cleaning up side by side. They ate at the small table by the fire, simple food, but it tasted like something more because of the company. He told stories about his friends, eyes lighting up. She told a few of her own, lighter ones, and found herself laughing without guarding every word. Cleanup was quick. Shoulders brushing, quiet smiles, and a comfortable of silence that didn't need filling. Before she even realized it, Kirishima was close, leaning in, and the world narrowed to the press of his lips against hers. Despite the roughness of his exterior, everything about him from the curve of his smile to the soft strands of hair falling over his forehead was gentle, tender. She tilted her head, letting herself fall into the warmth. He ruffled the pink strands playfully, then let his fingers trace the curve of one horn. Mina tensed instinctively. People had always stared, whispered, feared them. But Kirishima didn't pull away. He leaned in and pressed a soft, chaste kiss to the tip of each horn, like they were something precious. Her heart skipped. No one had ever touched them like that. Like they were beautiful. Like they were part of her worth loving. Mina felt full for the first time in her life, warm, safe, wanted. She smiled into the next kiss, deeper this time, and let herself believe, just for tonight, that maybe good things could happen to girls like her after all. They hadn't moved far from the table, just to the worn rug in front of the hearth, where they'd ended up sitting shoulder to shoulder, then hip to hip, then closer. The kissing had slowed after a while, turning from eager and exploratory to something quieter, deeper. Long, lingering presses of lips, soft laughs breathed against each other's mouths when one of them made a small happy sound. Eventually, Mina pulled back just enough to rest her forehead against his. Her yellow eyes were half-lidded and soft. "We should probably get some sleep," she murmured, but made no move to stand. Kirishima's hand was still in her hair, fingers gently tracing the base of one horn like he couldn't quite believe he was allowed to touch it. "Yeah," he agreed, voice low and rough. He shifted slightly, rubbing the back of his neck, a sheepish grin tugging at his lips. "I'll sleep on the floor, don't worry," he murmured softly. Ashido's eyes narrowed, her voice sharp but laced with concern. "Hush. Do you want to die? I don't have many warm things and you'll freeze to death on the floor." "Don't worry. I've got my cloak, it's thick enough." Ashido frowned at him. Kirishima folded. His blush deepened, spreading all the way to the tips of his ears. He opened his mouth, closed it, then managed a sheepish grin. "I mean, if you're sure." Mina felt her heart squeeze. He looked so beautiful like this, tall and strong and rough around the edges, but flushed and uncertain, eyes soft in the firelight. She stepped closer, took his hand, and tugged him gently toward the bed. "I'm sure." They climbed in together, the mattress dipping under their combined weight. The blankets were thin, but the space was small and there was no way to lie without touching. Mina didn't mind. Neither did he. She shivered once as the chill from the sheets seeped in. Kirishima's arm was around her instantly, warm, solid, careful. He pulled her close, tucking her against his chest like it was the most natural thing in the world. "You okay?" he murmured, breath warm against her temple. She nodded, burrowing closer. "Better now." He smiled against her hair, then tilted his head down and pressed a soft kiss to her cheek. Mina's eyes fluttered shut. She turned her face up to meet the next one on the lips, slow and lingering. Soon, they were fast asleep. Morning light filtered through the small, warped window pane, painting soft gold stripes across the tangled blankets on the narrow bed. Ashido stirred first, blinking slowly against the soft glow and the unfamiliar weight pressed against her side. She realized, with a blush that warmed her cheeks, that Kirishima's arm was draped casually over her waist, his face nuzzled into her hair. His breathing was deep and even behind her, his chest warm against her back. For a moment she just lay there, afraid to move, afraid the night before had been some cruel dream her lonely mind had cooked up. But no, his fingers were still loosely curled against her stomach, calloused thumb resting just below her ribs. His red hair tickled her shoulder where his face was half buried against her neck. She felt safe. Kirishima stirred, muttered something unintelligible and rolled slightly, bringing his warm body closer. "Morning," he murmured, voice thick with sleep, and Ashido's heart skipped. Mina turned in the circle of his arms so they were face to face. She reached up, brushing a strand of hair from his face, and he opened one eye, grinning sleepily. "I slept better than I have in years." His smile started small, then broke wide, sharp teeth, crinkled eyes, the full sunny grin she'd already started to crave. "Good," he said, voice still husky. "'Cause I was kinda hoping I didn't screw this up before breakfast." Mina laughed quietly, the sound lighter than she could remember it being. She traced one finger along the edge of his jaw, then up to the small scar on his cheek. "You didn't screw anything up." "I make a mean breakfast too," he whispered conspiratorially. "Eggs if you've got 'em. Or whatever you've got. I'm not picky." Mina felt that flutter again, hope, bright and terrifying. She let herself imagine it. Mornings like this, more than one. Coffee on the tiny table. His ridiculous bedhead across from her every day. Leaving this kingdom, these orders, this life behind with someone who kissed her horns like they were something beautiful. She pressed one more quick kiss to the corner of his mouth. "We've got eggs. And bread. And I think there's honey left." Kirishima's grin turned boyish. "Then let's make it the best diamond breakfast either of us has ever had." She got up. Kirishima whined mournfully. "5 more minutes," he said. Ashido laughed as she walked into the kitchen. She spotted a folded scrap of paper lay just inside the door, half hidden under the mat. The edges were stiff with frost, and her stomach tightened at the thought. How had she missed it? Her fingers trembled as she unfolded it. "Swing by Gates today." Hey. Her heart skipped. She realized with a jolt that it was a minute past. She grabbed her cloak from the hook, heart already hammering. "I'll be right back. Don't open the door to anyone," she called over her shoulder, sprinting into the streets before Kirishima could respond. The city blurred past her, cobblestones slick with frost, her cloak snapping behind her as she pushed herself harder, lungs burning. The streets were still half empty, breath fogging in the cold as she sprinted toward the palace district. Her mind raced through worst-case scenarios the whole way. Bakugo only ever called when it was urgent, so she had to be fast. Skidding to a stop at the underground dungeon entrance, she slowed just enough to catch her breath before slipping past the guards. Bakugo was just leaving from the lower corridor, his expression grim. "Blasty," she hissed, catching his arm. "Did you find it?" "The horse?" he asked at once. She shook her head ruefully. He nodded, impatient but not unkind. "Listen, I need you to lend me a bit of money." "Sorry." She raised her eyebrows but nodded. Bakugo asking for money was unusual. Of course she could. "And didn't you have friends further west?" "The invisible girl?" he asked. She nodded again. Good. I'll need you to get me there soon. Mina searched his face. He looked urgent. Almost fearful. That wasn't like him. That's when she noticed movement behind him in the open cell. A boy was curled against the wall, shadows and torchlight casting his green eyes in a soft glow. I didn't know you kept prisoners here still, she said quietly, voice carefully neutral. In these parts of the dungeon. Thought they were sealed off years ago. Bakugo looked down. They don't, he replied coldly. Not usually. This is just the last 4 days. Ashido took a note of the they. Mina took a step closer despite herself, peering into the cell. Torchlight caught on pale skin, on tangled green curls, on the faint scatter of freckles across a face too young. Freckles dusted across his face, barely visible in the dim light. He stirred, peering at her with quiet curiosity. Green hair and green eyes. Freckles. She jumped back. Oh. Bakugo's sharp voice cut through the moment. What's wrong? She turned to the boy, voice faint. Were you traveling with an older man? Dark-haired? He nodded, wary. Yeah. Why? Mina swallowed and turned to look back at Bakugo. What is the camper doing here? She gestured weakly toward the cell. His friends were looking for them. Bakugo stared at her, face incredulous. Camper? Pinky, this is the Prince of Aldera. His voice echoed in the chamber. And the other man you described is his general. The world tilted. Mina's heart went cold, blood draining from her face. What? She whispered. The boy, the prince pushed himself up slowly, blanket slipping from his shoulders. His eyes were wide, curious, hopeful. My friends. His voice was small, hopeful. Ashido couldn't speak for a moment, her chest tight. Then, forcing a smile, she managed, friends. She felt faint. No, this couldn't be. Yes, excuse me, sorry, are you friends with someone called Kirishima? The boy's entire face lit up. He scrambled to his feet, wincing but too excited to care. Kirishima? Is he here? Oh my God, yes. I'm friends with him. Where is he? Tell him I'm okay. How did you? He rambled on, voice high and frantic, and Ashido's heart sank further with every word. When he finally drew a shaky breath, she asked, her voice soft, careful. So, you're all Alderans? Izuku nodded eagerly. He's one of the finest soldiers we have. The ground felt like it was dropping away beneath her. Bakugo's sharp voice broke through her spiraling thoughts. Pinky? You good? Mina nodded, too fast, too numb, and took a step back. Yeah. I'll tell Hagakure. I'll leave now. She turned and walked away, legs carrying her on autopilot. Bye. The moment she was out of sight, tears sprang hot and sudden. She bit down hard on her lip, hard enough to taste copper as she ran back through the streets, cloak flapping behind her. Nausea rolled through her, sharp and unforgiving, while burning up her throat as memories of the night before crowded in uninvited, the warmth, the laughter, the way she had let herself believe, just for a few hours, that she was safe. That it meant something. She stumbled to the nearest street corner, vision blurring, and flagged down a passing chariot with a desperate wave. The driver pulled up, eyeing her tear-streaked face warily. Take me to Torikabudo, she managed, voice cracking as she pressed a handful of coins, more than the fare, into his palm. An ancient village name, half forgotten except by those who knew the old roads west. Hagakure's hidden refuge. The driver nodded. He flicked the reins and the chariot lurched forward. Mina curled into the corner of the seat, arms wrapped tight around herself, holding everything together by sheer will. The city blurred past her again, red walls, bustling markets, faces she didn't see. Every bump in the road jolted her stomach, but she didn't let the sobs out. Not yet. The chariot rattled away down the dusty road, leaving Mina alone in what looked like an empty meadow on the outskirts of Torikabudo. Ancient oaks ringed the clearing, their branches heavy with snow, but nothing else, no sign of life. She waited until the chariot turned and disappeared down the road, the sound of its wheels fading completely. Then she bent, picked up an apple from a nearby crate, and tossed it lightly into the air. Nothing. Her jaw tightened. She shifted a few steps to the left and threw another. This time the apple struck something solid with a dull thud and bounced away, and the air rippled, shuddering like disturbed water. A faint outline shimmered into view. Mina exhaled shakily. There. She stepped forward and knocked, 3 quick taps on what felt like solid wood but looked like nothing at all. It's me. Ashido. The air rippled. A soft blue, simple pine door appeared out of nowhere and swung open. Hagakure's voice floated out, warm and familiar. Mina, get in here before you freeze. Mina stepped inside. The door shut behind her, the illusion sealing seamlessly. The cottage was small and cozy, books everywhere, a crackling hearth, the faint scent of chamomile tea. Hagakure's clothes hung in the corner, moving slightly as she turned to greet her guest. But Kuga needs to stay here for a bit, Mina said, following her deeper into her home. Hagakure's floating sleeves rose in a nod. Of course, he's always welcome. You know that. Then silence. Hagakure's clothes shifted again, closer this time. Even without a visible face, Mina could feel her friends studying her. Mina. The voice softened. What's wrong? That was all it took. Ashido's composure shattered. She buried her face against her friend's shoulder and cried. Great, wrenching sobs that shook her whole body. Everything poured out, the warmth of the night before, Kirishima's gentle hands, the hope that had bloomed so bright and sudden, and then the cold, shattering truth in the dungeon. The prince. His friends. Kirishima's real reason for being there. You should find another guiding light. Guiding light. But I shine so bright. Chapter text. So I wander through these nights. I prefer hiding in plain sight. My 4th drink in my hand. These desperate prayers of a cursed man. Kirishima slipped out of the house cautiously, easing himself between the stone walls. He kept his head down and moved fast, pulse loud in his ears. He ducked between the narrow stone walls of the back alleys, hood pulled low, moving like the soldier he was, silent, quick, eyes scanning every corner. He knew Uraraka and Tsuyu were camped somewhere just outside the capital gates, watching the palace. He'd left his map behind in the rush. He cursed under his breath and just guessed, veering west toward the old hunter trails beyond the walls where patrols were thin. Kirishima muttered under his breath and did the only thing he could, guessed. After an hour of cautious roaming, ducking behind supply carts and melting into crowds, he spotted a weathered hunter's hut half hidden in a copse of pines. He approached slow, hand on where his sword hilt usually was. There was nothing there now, but the movement comforted him. The door cracked open before he reached it. Kirishima? Uraraka's voice was soft and incredulous. He broke into a grin as she and Tsuyu rushed out. The 3 of them collided in a fierce, relieved hug, Uraraka's arms floating them all an inch off the ground for a second in her excitement, Tsuyu's tongue flicking happily. Kirishima's smile faded fast. Izuku, Aizawa-sensei, have you seen them? Is he? Uraraka's face fell. No, she said sadly. Not with our own eyes. But I did overhear guards talking near the east wall. And we've been watching the palace movements. Looks like he's still inside. Alive. Kirishima nodded, jaw tightening. Then we need a way in. The dungeons. Definitely. Tsuyu frowns. There's been unusual activity down there, extra patrols at night, supply deliveries that don't match the official logs. I'm here now. The others will come with help soon. We have a better chance now. They huddled inside the hut, maps spread on the rough table, voices low as they sketched plans, diversion tactics, patrol schedules Uraraka had memorized, possible entry points Tsuyu had scouted from the treelines. Then Uraraka's eyes softened. How about you? You've been in deep cover. Anyone helping? Kirishima rubbed the back of his neck, cheeks warming despite everything. Yeah. There's this girl. Ashido. Mina. I think I might be able to trust her. But it's too soon. We can't risk Izuku or Aizawa-sensei on a hunch. Tsuyu tilted her head thoughtfully. Karo, if your gut says yes, maybe. But be careful. They spent the rest of the morning refining the plan. Then Kirishima decided to help the girls out and hunt wild animals for them, because his hardening making quick work of snares while Uraraka floated up for a better vantage and Tsu blended into the underbrush. Are you sure it's safe out here? Kirishima asked Urarak while they were walking back. Uraraka shrugged. We're keeping good lookout. Let's just hope for the best. By midday he'd caught 3 more fat rabbits. He traded a few coins at a quiet market stall for skis, salt, and a small jar of honey, things Mina's pantry had been low on. He bid goodbye to the girls and slipped back through the gates just as the afternoon bells rang, heart lighter with the weight of real progress and heavier with worry about where Mina had gone. Back at her house, he rolled up his sleeves and set to work. Soon the small kitchen filled with the rich scent of roasting rabbit, garlic, rosemary, honey glaze crackling on the skin. He hummed under his breath as he worked, setting out 2 plates, arranging the meat with care, adding the last of the wild greens they'd foraged days ago. A beautiful lunch for her to come back to. Ashido returned nearly 2 hours later. Kirishima turned from the hearth, apron tied around his waist, face lighting up with that ridiculous, sunny grin. Hey, welcome back. Where'd you go off to in such a hurry? Everything all right? He gestured proudly to the table. Here I cooked the most delicious food for you. Her face stayed cold. What is wrong with you? Mina cut in. The grin faltered. Kirishima set down the spoon, brow furrowing in gentle confusion. Huh? She glared, stepping closer. Are the things people say about you true? Kirishima rubbed the back of his head, still trying to read her. I don't understand. She took a step closer. Where are you from? He swallowed. I told you. We're traveling. We passed through the moors. Her eyes narrowed. And your friends? They're... He faltered, rubbing the back of his head. They're just our friends? Were they traveling with you? Ashido, he said carefully, unease crawling up his spine. What is this? I know you're lying, she said, voice rising. Kirishima's heart went cold. He shook his head slowly. Ashido, how could you? She shouted suddenly, tears springing fresh. Come into my house, sleep in my bed, eat my food and lie straight to my face. How despicable. Ashido, I don't even care why you had to lie. Why did you have to do this too? Why come in? Why get me on your side? Why? Kirishima stepped toward her instinctively. Hey, let's slow down. Her acid flared. It lashed out without warning, splashing across his arm. Kirishima yelped, stumbling back, pain blooming hot and sharp. He hissed in pain, skin sizzling faintly, but he didn't back away. Mina jerked back, horrified at herself. Stop, just get out. Get out of here, please. Please wait, he said softly, voice cracking. What happened? Stop, she said hoarsely. Just get out. Please. Get out. Mina's hand lashed out. The table jolted, wood screeching, and the plates went flying, bowls, cups, the careful meal he'd made, all of it crashing to the floor. Broth splattered the walls. Meat skidded across the stone. Something shattered clean in two. Kirishima flinched, but he didn't even glance at it, didn't even care about the hours of work scattered across the floor. His eyes stayed on her, wide and stricken, like the sound had come from very far away. Wait, Kirishima said, breath uneven. What happened? Please, talk to me. She sank heavily onto a stool, staring at the floor and the mess. You're still not telling me the truth. He dropped to his knees in front of her instantly, heedless of the sting in his arm. Ashido, he said softly, panic threading his voice. Please. What is it? Her head snapped up, eyes blazing with hurt. Your friend, she spat. Your prince. Travelers? She laughed again, sharp and broken. You're not some wanderer. You're an Aldrin soldier. Kirishima's face went pale. He backed up an inch, suddenly nervous. Oh, now you're worried? Mina stood, fury pouring back in, grabbing the carving knife from the table with shaking fingers. Get out of here. Get out. He backed away slowly, hands raised. Ashido, please. Out. She pushed him. Kirishima retreated slowly toward the door, hands raised, eyes never leaving her face. Mina slammed it shut behind him. He didn't know what to do. Should he trust her? Should he? Ashido, he said quietly. then louder. "Ashido, please." Then she yanked it open again, hurled his cloak out into the snow, and slammed it once more. Kirishima's heart ached. He took that as an act of consideration from her side, instead of her just kiking him out. He stood there, stunned, cloak pooled at his feet. He stood there, breathing hard and fast, for a long moment, snowflakes melting on his lashes. He'd fed up. Badly. After a minute, he started knocking, softly at first and then rather desperately. "Ashido, please. Ashido, please let me explain. Please." He was going to trust her. He didn't know why. An hour passed. His voice grew hoarse. He slid down the door and sat in the snow, back against the wood, head in his hands, knocking every few minutes. Finally, he hardened his shoulder and broke in, door splintering gently under his controlled force. She was on the same stool, face buried in her hands, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "Ashido! What the F?" she screamed, scrambling up and grabbing her knives again. She spinned the knives in her hands. "What the F is wrong with you?" Kirishima dropped immediately, knees hitting the floor, head bowed. "Please," he said, voice breaking. "Please listen. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Get out. Please," he whispered. "He was kidnapped." The words burst out of him. "We didn't know what happened. He vanished from the palace in the middle of the DMN ball. We then heard that they were keeping him here. Please, Ashido, I didn't lie about everything, I swear. He's like a brother to me. I really, really need help. Please." He stayed on his knees, unmoving even when she shoved at his shoulder. "I'm sorry," he said, voice breaking at her feet. "I'm sorry I lied. I didn't know what else to do. I'm sorry. He's in danger. We don't know what they're going to do to him." Mina's anger seemed to falter a little. She sat back down, knives dropping. "I saw him," she said quietly. Kirishima's head snapped up, eyes wide with sudden hope, and heart lifting as he looked up at her from. "Really? Is he okay?" "Yes," she nodded, voice small. "He looked fine. He told me to tell you he was all right." The strength drained out of Kirishima all at once. He slumped forward in pure relief, hands pressed to the floor, forehead nearly touching the floor, nearly touching her feet, breath shuddering out of him. He placed his hands on her knees, tentative, as if afraid even that might be too much. His eyes were glassy, brimming, and he looked up at open, unguarded, ruined. He looked up at her from where he knelt, red eyes glistening with unshed tears, bottom lip trembling. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Mina stared down at him, her own vision blurred. The anger had drained out of her somewhere between his desperate pleas and the raw honesty in his face. What was left was a bone-deep ache. Betrayal, yes, but also something softer she didn't want to name yet. Her hand moved without permission, fingers brushing absently through his spiky red hair. It was softer than it looked. He leaned into the touch just a fraction, eyes fluttering shut for a second like it was the only thing keeping him anchored. "I'll fix the door," he said suddenly, voice steadier now, though still rough. He stood slowly, careful not to jostle her, and stepped gingerly over the shattered plates and spilled food on the floor. "I'm sorry about the door too." He didn't look back as he slipped out the broken doorway, cloak pulled tight against the cold. Snow crunched under his boots as he disappeared down the alley, searching for a plank, nails, anything, to patch the damage he'd caused. He came back a few minutes later with a rough plank, a handful of nails, and a small hammer. Snow melted off his shoulders as he knelt in the doorway without a word. Mina watched him without a word as he fitted the wood into place, hands steady despite the way his jaw kept tightening. Tap, tap, tap. He tested it, pressed his palm to the door, nodded to himself. Then he turned back inside. He gathered the broken plates carefully, setting the shards aside. He found the broom first, sweeping carefully, gathering shards into a pile. Then a wet cloth from the basin, wiping up the sticky remnants. Mina's eyes followed him the whole time, unblinking. He scrubbed the floor until it gleamed again, then washed his hands in the sink, sleeves rolled up, forearms still faintly red from the earlier acid burn. He paused, glanced around the kitchen, and quietly removed a few things from the shelves, making space. He rummaged through her shelves, pulling out whatever he could find. The last potatoes, a small onion, the dried herbs she kept in the jar. He lit the fire. He cooked again. Simpler this time. He moved like someone trying not to startle a wounded animal. Mina still hadn't eaten anything all day. He suddenly recalled the events of his morning and pursed his lips. Should he tell her? He shook his head and plated the food carefully, added a piece of bread he toasted over the flame, and carried it to her. He set it gently on the table next to Ishido. Then he sat across from her, hands clasped on the table, eyes down. Mina stared at the plate for a long moment. What else were you lying about? Mina asked. He sat down slowly, keeping his distance. She picked up the plate and hope flared in his chest. Kirishima hesitated a little. He let out a breath. My friends are here, he said at last. From Aldra. They're looking for Izuku. I went to meet them this morning. They're outside the gates, at a little hunter's hut. Mina paused with the fork halfway to her mouth. She looked at him curiously. More men? No, he said quickly. They're girls. We discussed about how to get them out. She nodded once, expression unreadable. I'll tell you everything, he said hoarsely. He took her other hand in his and looked at her decidedly. My name is Kirishima Aijuru. Yes, I lied. Yes, my friend Izuku, he's the prince. Yes, I'm an Aldrin soldier, and I'm really sorry I lied. The door burst open. Well, a voice said pleasantly. Thank you for that confession, soldier. A guard in Endeavor Crimson walked in with a heavy boot, clapping his gloved hands together, slow and mocking. Two more guards surged in behind him, massive and armored. They seized Kirishima before he could even stand, rough hands clamping his arms, wrenching them behind his back. Cold iron cuffs snapped shut around his wrists. Mina shot to her feet. No! Kirishima's eyes met hers, wide, wild with shock and something that looked painfully like betrayal. They dragged him toward the door. He stumbled, then thrashed against the hold, hardening his skin instinctively. Kirishima twisted, panic flaring in his eyes as he was dragged backward. He looked at her, gaze searching. How are they here? He demanded hoarsely. Did you call them? Mina shook her head frantically, bile burning up her throat. No. Her mouth opened but nothing came out. Kirishima struggled harder, boots scraping against the floor, but one of the guards struck him hard across the back of the head. He went down with a sharp cry, knees buckling. When they hauled him up again, he was limping, head bowed, blood spotting his temple. They dragged him out into the snow, boots scraping, his body sagging between them. The door hung open behind them, cold wind howling in. Mina stood frozen in the middle of the room, chest heaving, tears burning tracks down her cheeks. The patch door creaked in the wind. Spilling out to you for free. But darling, please. You wouldn't take my word for it. If you knew who was talking chapter text. Never take advice from someone who's falling apart. Izuku hadn't seen Bakugo all day. The cell felt emptier for it, colder, quieter, the shadows longer. He kept expecting the door to scrape open and that familiar scowl to appear, red eyes flicking over him. He had gotten used to the other man's presence. Mirio, at least, kept appearing, always with food, always with that easy, bright smile, and Izuku guessed immediately whose doing it was. Gratitude sat heavy in his chest for Katsuki. Could you check on the general too? Izuku asked softly one afternoon, pushing his plate away only once he was sure he'd eaten enough. Please. And give him some of this. I don't think he's been getting special treatment. Mirio nodded without hesitation. Don't worry about it. I'll buy food for him too. Izuku shook his head quickly. No, Katsuki doesn't have any more money. Just give him some of mine. Please. Mirio's eyes crinkled with quiet amusement. Katsuki doesn't have to know. He stayed while Izuku ate, sitting cross-legged on the stone floor like they were sharing lunch in a sunlit courtyard instead of a dungeon. Izuku found himself talking. Small things at first, then more. How he grew up in the palace, the library he'd practically lived in, the way his mother used to sneak him extra sweets during long council meetings. Mirio listened, then shared his own stories too. His childhood, the places he'd been, stories that were light and ordinary and comforting. Izuku listened like it was oxygen. His head felt quieter when Mirio talked. I'm surprised Dynamite lets you call him Katsuki, Mirio said once, amused. Izuku tilted his head. Why wouldn't he? Mirio just chuckled and changed the subject. Sometimes Mirio left and came back with updates. Aizawa was still alive, still refusing to cooperate, still himself. Izuku clung to those words like a promise, like a lifeline. They talked in hushed voices about Eri too, about escape routes and timing and guards. Mirio was determined, focused, but he shut down Izuku's suggestion of getting her out immediately. Too risky, he said gently. We do this once and we do it right. Izuku hated it, but he trusted Mirio's calm certainty. Eventually exhaustion pulled him under. Mirio's quiet, sleep well, kid, the last thing he heard before darkness took him. He woke to voices again. They came from beyond the wall, muffled but clear enough to make his heart stutter. The general remains unbreakable. Tuya's drawl was unmistakable. Just kill him, another voice muttered. This one was gravelly and rather impatient. No. We're going to use him for leverage. The pause. I don't know why Dynamite's acting so useless lately. Who cares about that kid? Just use the prince. The prince will break. Tuya snorted. No, the prince is a tough nut to crack as well. Oh. Yes. And it sure as hell doesn't help that he's somehow convinced Dynamite to help. I don't know your obsession with the Dynamite kid is Dabi. He appeared out of nowhere. Tuya snapped. And Enji Todoroki is a foolish man. He won't know a traitor when they're right under his nose. The other voice laughed softly. Wasn't Dynamite the one who captured the prince, though? Yes. He follows orders well, Tuya admitted, then scoffed. But something about him is wrong. He's an assassin with a conscience. That can't be too bad, can it? Surely the disappearances bother him too. Assassins can't have moral compasses, Tamura. Tuya said flatly. You of all people should know that. The pause. So you think he's onto us? Dynamite. Tuya hummed. But he's definitely growing affections for the Alderan. Tamura barked a short, rasping laugh. How do you figure that? The prince doesn't eat, Tuya said, voice dropping lower. Even the general cracked eventually that had to eat that sheet to stay alive. It's impossible to hold out that long without help. I've gone longer, Tamura muttered. So, what's the plan then? Did they find Shudo? No. The mission failed. But I believe the general's soft spot is the prince. Surely seeing his student in pain will get the man to talk. I don't know, Tabi. The general is stony. He's refused to give up a single piece of info. And the Kaminari brat went nuts with the electrocuting too. There was a pause again this time. We'll see, Tuya said. Footsteps faded down the corridor and Izuku saw a blue-haired man outlined in the light. Was he another guard? Izuku thought. He wasn't wearing Endeavor colors, he noted. Izuku curled tighter under the thin blanket, stomach churning, heart hammering against his ribs. He pressed a shaking hand to his mouth to keep any sound from escaping. Hours went by once again. Izuku felt like he was going mad in the silence. Mirio slipped into the cell like a ghost, the door creaking softly behind him. His usual bright smile was gone, replaced by deep shadows under his eyes and a slump in his broad shoulders that made him look smaller than Izuku had ever seen him. The general's not doing well, he said quietly, voice heavy with exhaustion. They did something to him. Izuku scrambled upright, blankets falling away, chains rattling as his eyes flooded. It. Mirio lowered himself onto the edge of the cell, exhaling heavily. It took hours to heal him. Don't worry, he's holding on. Barely, but he is. Izuku's breath hitched. He pressed a trembling hand to his mouth, trying to hold the sobs back. Mirio reached into his satchel and pulled out 2 slightly squashed cream buns wrapped in cloth. This is all I could manage today, he said, offering them. Izuku took them with shaking hands, the sweet scent turning his stomach even as gratitude flooded him. He tried to smile. He's a strong man, Prince, Mirio said gently. Don't cry. Izuku wiped his face with the back of his wrist, nodding mutely. On a brighter note, Mirio said, his voice softening. I talked to the girl today. Izuku's chest lifted slightly, the tight knot of anxiety loosening just a fraction. You did? Is she? Her name's Eri, Mirio continued. She's a tough little girl. Izuku's chest tightened. She had to be a tough little girl, he thought. Apparently your general has discovered her too. He's been talking to her through the walls, trying to comfort her. Izuku felt his heart roar with something fierce and warm, love, pride, gratitude all tangled together. Izawa-sensei, even broken and chained in his own cell, was still protecting someone. Still being the hero he'd always been. He pressed a hand to his eyes, tears slipping free despite his smile. He's the best. Mirio nodded, understanding completely, and Izuku knew he did because he had heard stories about Sir Night-Eye. She's 13, Mirio added quietly. They're doing experiments on her, I think. Anger flared hot and sudden inside Izuku, his hands balling into fists. You have to get her out. We can't leave her here. Mirio's face was grim, but his eyes held steady resolve. We won't. Don't worry. If Dynamite is back by tomorrow, I might have a plan. I'll need his help though. Only he knows the palace layouts as well as the guards do. Izuku nodded, his mind already spinning with possibilities, holding on to the fragile hope that they might actually get her out safely. He picked up his bun again. Hang in there a little longer, Prince. Things are moving. Then Mirio's expression shifted, something uneasy passing through his eyes. The guards were talking on my way here, he added. They caught another Aldrin. Izuku froze mid-bite. His head snapped up, eyes wide. What? I don't know anything else, Mirio said. Just overheard it. Izuku sank back against the wall, the buns forgotten in his lap. Nausea rolled through him as he forced himself to eat. Mirio stayed a little longer, quiet company in the dim cell, then slipped out with a tired wave and a promise to return when he could. The door locked. Izuku was alone again. He curled into himself and cried silent, wrenching sobs for Aizawa, for the new prisoner, for everyone waiting outside the gates who had no idea if he was even alive. He missed his mom. He missed All Might. An hour later, maybe more, commotion erupted outside. Shouts echoed down the corridor, guards yelling orders, boots pounding, something heavy crashing against stone. Then a roar, furious, defiant, vibrated through the underground walls. Izuku surged to his feet, heart pounding. Struggling. Grunts. A sharp curse that cut off abruptly. Izuku pressed himself to the bars, straining to see. The dungeon doors burst open. 5 guards stumbled in, dragging a struggling prisoner between them, barely able to keep a hold of him. The man thrashed wildly, muscles straining, skin flashing hard and red in patches as he fought the cuffs and chains. It took all 5 to hold him. One guard's nose was bleeding, another limping. He fought like a storm, teeth bared, voice hoarse with rage. Izuku strained forward, squinting through the torchlight. Who needed 5 guards? Then suddenly, the man went quiet. Crimson eyes met Izuku's through the bars. The guards took advantage of the sudden lack of struggle, and shoved the captive into the cell across from Izuku's and slammed the door, cursing under their breath as they retreated. Izuku? The voice cracked, disbelieving. Is that you? Izuku couldn't breathe. Standing there, wrists cuffed just like his own, bruised and bloodied but unmistakable, was Kirishima Iger. Kirishima was on him at once, crossing the narrow corridor between cells in 2 long strides. His cuffed hands were awkward, but he still managed to grip Izuku's shoulders, turning him gently but firmly, lifting the edge of his torn shirt to see the damage. My prince, he whispered, voice cracking. How are you? What did they do to you? The bruises, the half-healed lash marks, the faint scars from stitches. Kirishima's face went pale beneath the blood at his temple. Izuku still couldn't speak. His throat felt sealed shut. All he could do was stare at his best friend out here, in chains, in this hell. Kirishima's eyes searched his, frantic. Izuku, talk to me. What? Izuku finally croaked, voice raw and small. What are you doing here? Kirishima let out a long, shaky sigh and sank to the floor in front of the bars, running a hand through his hair. I don't know, man. He launched into the whole story, words tumbling over each other, desperate to get it all out. Izuku listened, wide-eyed, heart aching for his friend. He interrupted occasionally with updates of his own, every time Kirishima looked fearfully at him. They healed them, don't worry, he said, watching Kirishima's face crumple as he heard what the king had done. I'm sorry. It's not your fault. You were taken from our palace. Right under our eyes. Izuku changed the subject. I saw her this morning, Izuku whispered instead, remembering Ishido. She was talking to Katsuki. Down here. Kirishima's head snapped toward him. This Katsuki, the one who's been helping you? Izuku nodded slowly. Yes, he said hesitantly. Kirishima shook his head, brow furrowed. I don't think he is, man. How were the guards there so fast? Right after I told her everything? Why did they catch me then? Izuku shook his head dumbly, confusion swirling. Kirishima's gaze softened slightly, thoughtful. Ishido and Katsuki, they looked like friends, yeah? Definitely, Izuku managed, nodding, recalling the way Bakugo had asked for money. Katsuki didn't look like the person who asked for help casually. Kirishima's expression hardened for a moment, then softened again. Yeah. Then I don't think we can trust them. Izuku's stomach dropped, but he couldn't argue. The man was, after all, an assassin. Kirishima forced a grin, small, but real. But don't worry. Uraraka and Tsuchan are here. Outside the walls. They're watching, planning. They're going to help. Definitely. Izuku felt a spark of hope flicker in his chest. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the second cream bun Mirio had brought. The one he hadn't been able to stomach earlier. Here, he said. Kirishima's eyes lit up. He took it gratefully and devoured it in 3 bites, humming happily. Thanks, man. They chattered after that, quietly, carefully, voices low so the guards wouldn't hear. Kirishima told him about the hunter's hut, about Uraraka and about Tsuyu, catching frogs for dinner and insisting they tasted like chicken. Izuku told him about Mirio phasing through walls, about the little blue-haired girl upstairs, but he didn't speak of Katsuki. Selfishly, he was grateful for company. Never take advice from someone who's falling apart.